3, 2, 1. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you are, and for some ungodly reason you still have the boredom to watch this show. Welcome to the 4th episode of the World So Far Report. As always, alongside Minsk, my colleague Viktor Kainik.
Shalom.
Right, so new setup, in a way. It's gonna be this setup for quite some time now. I have no idea. Could be 5 weeks, could be 15 weeks. Could be 150 weeks. I have no idea. But it's gonna be this setup for a while, and I'm gonna be physically carrying the logistics necessary for the show every other week, because other than next week, because next week is right before the elections, so obviously we're gonna keep it in time. But then we're gonna switch it to a once in 2 weeks model, because physically carrying stuff isn't particularly fun. Also, the episodes will be forcibly shortened a little bit. For the same reason, basically, because it takes a lot more time to just carry the logistics.
Yeah, not to mention that there are a lot of news articles that come out, and there's a completely different story when you're dealing with the entire planet, rather than just Romania.
Right, but on the other hand, on the good news, videos with me alone in English will be back soon enough, as I no longer have pressing matters on me. So yeah, because soon enough the election season will be over, and then there'll be quite a peaceful period until I guess 22, when the elections in France are due. Then I'm gonna be busy. Oh wait, next year there's elections in Germany. Scheiße. Well, at least I tried.
Yes, please say Scheckering to do a collab in Germany.
Yeah, we're gonna do that too. But yeah, what I was saying is thank you all for your patience. So yeah, we remind you that this show exists solely because you give Scheckering. For instance, as an emergency, I really need a new hard drive, because otherwise I won't be able to do anything of what I just promised, because all of that involves hundreds and hundreds of gigabytes of raw footage, and somewhere that footage has to be stored, and well, with very little hard drive space, that's a little bit difficult. But you knew that already. As always, every 6 months I buy another 4 terabyte hard drive, so it's become quite a standard. If you want to curse at us, if you want to send us news, if you want, God forgive, praise us, topics at freedomalternative.com. We're also on BitChute. Don't forget to subscribe there as well, and to subsidize the poor Slavs in Romania. Keep crypto so I can keep the subscription open, so I can have a second Romanian channel on BitChute as well. Right, so of course we're going to start with North America, and of course we're going to talk about the NY Post saga. We're not going to read the articles. You're going to read them by yourself if you want, if you haven't done so already. If you haven't read those articles already, where have you been living lately?
Yeah.
So yeah, smoking gun email reveals how Hunter Biden introduced Ukrainian businessman to VP Dan. Is that any surprise?
Well, by no means.
I mean, really, the whole situation with Hunter Biden is treated either as Russian disinformation, as by the hacker known as Gen 2. Okay, that was fake news, I know, but it was still funny. I'm talking about the fake news perpetrated by the hacker known as 4chan. Basically, they edited a tweet by Rachel Maddow. But still, I mean, it's either treated as Russian disinformation, which is not, or as some breaking news, which is also not.
Yes, but it's actually impressive to see how Hunter Biden failed OPSEC so spectacularly in order to have not just on his laptop but also on Facebook, talking about sitting with underage girls.
Yeah, the portion with the underage minor, I'm not treating it very seriously yet. Not because I don't believe the Biden family of being capable of that. Oh no, that's I totally believe them capable of that. But what I'm saying is that it has kind of become a meme, Democrats and pedos. So I mean, it's very hard to take it seriously outright, considering that the only evidence we have of that is just someone said that someone saw, which is not particularly strong evidence, no matter how much we would want it to be. But on the other hand, the part about emails, that's something that we've been able to see, we've been able to authenticate, so as a result we can treat that one very seriously. What's interesting is that the press, and we'll get to Twitter immediately, but the press went into full panic mode, and that's quite surprising considering that, how should I put this? It's not a big deal. It really isn't. I mean, if the press has said, yeah, okay, yeah, the piece of news is real, but you know, New York Times wrote about this as early as 2015, December 2015. It's not a new conflict of interest. Well, we've known about it, and Hunter Biden resigned from what's it called, the Burisma, right? So as a result, you know, it's a very old conflict. What's the point of bringing it up now?
Yeah, but
That's how I would have treated if I had worked for the Democrats.
yeah, indeed. But considering that the things that Hunter Biden did, most in part because his dad was a VP back then, casts a very negative light on Sleepy Joe's campaign.
Sure, but it would have cost a lower, or not a better light, but definitely would have made less damage on his campaign if the press had shrugged it. They said, yeah, this happened, but we knew that already. It's not new information. It's been on public record since at least December 2015. Carry on.
Yes, but the difference this time is that this you have to justify the money that they're getting for their jobs.
Right.
Remember Learn to Code?
Right, yes. I also remember at the beginning of the panicdemic in March, when the journalists were complaining that a lot of journalist jobs are being just swiftly cut off. They've all been laid off by the hundreds of thousands, and but just in a period when society needs them the most. No, nobody ever needed y'all. Ever.
No. Definitely not during the panicdemic.
Learn to code. But yes, so the press did a terrible job at covering this because they went into full panic mode instead of just shrugging it off. Now, I get it. You all on the press are paid to shill for the Democrats. So you know, if I were to be a Democrat shill, that's exactly how I would have done it. You say, yes, yeah, that's kind of terrible, but you know, it's been 5 years. The Trump campaign is getting so desperate that they're using 5-year-old incidents for something new. Come up with something new. And that would have shifted the pressure back on the Trump campaign. But no, why be smart about it? No, let's go full panic mode, and then Twitter goes in and they censor the link, and then they censor the ability to send it via direct messaging. And then Jim Jordan posts it on the House Judiciary website, and then Twitter bans that one too. And now you have both the right and the sensible left. I mean, I was reading on The Intercept. I'm going to leave the link in the low bar. I'm not going to read The Intercept out loud ever. but you know, even on The Intercept, you know, that guy who is a full-on socialist shill was like, hold on a second, no, that's kind of terrible. I mean, Twitter is now censoring government websites. I mean, no.
There's totally no interference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so social media treated this terribly, especially Twitter. Facebook was a little bit more tolerant about it, much to my surprise, I have to admit. I would have expected the other way around, because I'm accustomed to having my Facebook account suspended for sharing the truth on Facebook.
Particularly at this time.
Well, admittedly, Facebook deleted my main account on the excuse that I'm influencing the elections, and I'm pretty sure they're going to turn it back on November the 4th or something like that.
Yeah, but what happened with Twitter will particularly come in handy when Trump will get re-elected, and then the publisher versus platform debate will begin for big tech, particularly social media.
Yeah, I'm not particularly optimistic about that because it doesn't. First of all, it doesn't even matter who wins the election. There will be a debate, platform versus publisher. The problem is that if it's bipartisan, they're lying. They're lying, right? And you have both Democrats and Republicans waving the flag of this particular particularly contentious topic, and Democrats seem to be very keen on regulating social media, and I have to admit I'm a bit more scared about those guys than Jack Dorsey. I mean, Jack Dorsey is just a dude. You can kick him to the curb. You don't even have to do much. You just have to sneeze in his direction and it'll be fine. But when it comes to the full weight of the federal government, that's a little bit more complicated. Not that that can't be avoided, of course it can, but it's a little bit more complicated, and I'm a little bit more scared about that one than. And even if Trump gets elected, I'm still not convinced. I wouldn't let regulating social media on the hands of some of the more evangelical-leaning members of the good old party. I'm just saying. I don't trust them. And then the Trump campaign, whether they were pressed or not, it doesn't even matter. They kept on rolling with it. And now the chief of cabinet, I guess, it's Mr. Meadows, is threatening with a Romanian connection with money flowing to the Biden family. And this, I guess, it's the portion of the podcast where we can bring in some breaking news.
Yes.
Yeah, first of all, Meadows is not full of shit. He knows what he's talking about. I don't know how this will pan out in the American news. What I've seen, especially in that interview that is being circulated on social media these days, I've seen that the quote-unquote journalist, the anchor or whatever, was surprised. Sorry, did you mean Russia? I said, no,
I meant Romania.
I meant Romania. So that already raised a few eyebrows, and that's probably because it's one thing to expect this kind of messy business in Moscow or even in Kiev. It's a whole different thing to expect it in a geostrategic NATO country. So I presume that will be enough to keep the attention of the press, of the American press, on the topic. What was more interesting was to watch the evolution of this topic from this side of the pond, because the Lügenpresse here, or as we would call them, the bought-up press, pressa miluita, because they tried to avoid this topic really hard over the last 3 months. They really tried, and of course some outlets that are more or less, how should I say, couch influenced, let's put it this way. They've started an entire series of articles about the Biden connections in Eastern Europe, and now just a few hours ago, as we're taping this, it's Thursday in the evening when we're taping this, just a few hours ago they published episode 3, and as of episode 4 or 5, I think, if I recall correctly, yes, I read their articles in advance, it's gonna be starting to get into our politicians, and it's gonna be glorious.
Yeah,
with full context.
I can't personally wait to see who's responsible for sending money to the Bidens.
For now, at least over the last year, because again, this is a topic that's been covered before in 2019, both in the American press and in the Romanian press. For now, the press is still claiming that, at least the Romanian press, the American press, they seem to have forgotten that they themselves brought this topic up last year, but the Romanian press is still vigorously claiming that, it's all about that particular deal with Puiu Popoviciu, which was 8 years ago, started in 2012, and Popoviciu worked with Hunter Biden until late 2017, so about 5 years collaboration, during which Popoviciu got sentenced to jail, and then he ran away to London to avoid imprisonment, and then Hunter Biden used his connection in the Congress and in the U.S. administration to try to persuade as many U.S. officials that Popoviciu is a victim of a political witch hunt, and of course that wasn't true. Not even the Democrats bought that one. And eventually, after a definitive conviction at the Supreme Court, you could call it, they basically ended the collaboration. That's the official story. And it's true that Hunter Biden's collaboration with Popoviciu kind of ended then, because there's no way you can find any other further connection between the two as of February 2018 and onwards. That's not the whole story. It's really not the whole story. And also, you will notice that neither in English nor in Romanian you will find anything about the details of the collaboration between Popoviciu and Hunter Biden. Some of those details could have something to do with the new embassy in Bucharest, the field on which it was built.
Oh yeah. Oh boy.
Which happened to have been previously owned and managed by a high-ranking national liberal official, and another national liberal official signing off on that particular deal, which was way outside of the legal framework. And then the State Department pretending that they didn't see that. State Department run by Hillary Clinton. It's gonna be glorious. And the more there's gonna be digging into that, the more fun it'll be to watch this story. Now, what I don't know, I really don't know, whether this story will have any meaningful impact, this side story, the Romanian connection, I don't think this will have any meaningful impact on the election, on the US election. On ours, yes. But
Mostly because it will still take some time, because Hunter Biden's laptop just got sent, 2 days ago to the FBI. It's gonna
that's
take
the official story, because the FBI had a copy of the data for a year now.
Yeah, they did, but it still takes some time to sift through everything and then try to cross-reference with other shady dealings. As the article says, so there's Ukraine, there's also China, there's also Romania, and God knows how many others could there be.
There is something about the Labour Party in the UK, but that's gonna be for a year and a half from now. Hunter Biden is young. There's plenty of time for prosecution.
Compared to his dad.
Compared to his dad, yeah. I mean, his dad, I don't think he would be mentally fit to stand trial on anything, really. I mean, I could legitimately believe Sleepy Joe if he says he doesn't remember. So, yeah. Again, I don't think this will have a significant impact. On the other hand, the email story seems to be rolling on, and it's having a bigger impact than I expected, precisely because of the hysterical reaction by the press. Because the press, again, could have reported it like, on a marginal corner of the newspaper and say, yeah, by the way, an update on our story from a year ago. Here it is. We'll see what the FBI has to say, and just leave it like that. Nothing would have happened, and Sleepy Joe's chances would be better now than before. On the other hand, I've seen that the Democrats have increased the amount of shilling on the talking point that but nobody likes Trump and things of that nature. I don't know, man. I'm still looking at the rallies. I've just seen on social media a rally held by Obama endorsing Biden in the streets, and there were like 20 people, and Obama with a weird mask on and speaking in a loudspeaker. And I'm like, that's pathetic, man.
Yeah, we've seen this movie before back in 2016, but at least Hillary had more than just 20 people present at the rallies.
The best argument that I've seen against Trump and in favor of the position that Trump might be losing the election, the best argument that I've seen is that Hillary had a higher unfavorability rate than favorability rate, whereas Biden is pretty much tied, 42% favorability, 42% unfavorability, whereas with Hillary it was like 39-4, 50 something against. So I think that's the best argument that I've seen in favor of Joe Biden, in the sense that Joe Biden stands a bigger chance because of that. There are fewer people who absolutely despise Joe Biden, whereas with Hillary, nobody liked Hillary Clinton, like nobody. So I suspect that's the reason why you will see a lot more in the coming weeks until the election night. More of these attempts, some of them successful, some of them not so much, at bringing in the dirt about Joe Biden out in the open. This is the guy that wrote that particularly unpopular crime bill. I'm surprised the Republicans aren't using that talking point a lot more often. They do, but
yeah, but we're gonna see, because tonight's the last election debate. And that's going to be particularly interesting. See what Trump has got to. He's definitely updated on the situation.
Yeah, of course. I don't know. I'm not making any bets on debates. I didn't like his performance in the previous one. He was too soft. Maybe this time Donald Trump will not be so soft. Although I can understand, from an empathetic standpoint, do you really want to wipe the floor with Sleepy Joe? I mean, it's, you just don't treat old people like that.
Biden for president.
And Donald Trump is not the most polite man in the world, and that is to put it mildly, but still you don't treat old people too badly. Right. Fox News 50 Cent says vote for Trump in light of Biden's tax plan. I'm out. It appears 50 Cent knows who he's voting for. The 45-year-old hip-hop mogul, born Curtis James Jackson III, took to Instagram on Monday to offer his support for President Trump after seeing figures related to former VP Joe Biden's proposed tax plan. The star shared an image from what appeared to be a news broadcast displaying the top tax rates by state under the Biden tax plan. Among the states mentioned was New York, which the broadcast said it would be taxed at a rate of 58%, while New York City would be taxed at 62%. What the fuck? Vote for Trump, I'm out, wrote Jackson in the caption. Fuck you, New York, the Knicks never win anyway. I don't care, Trump doesn't like black people. 62%? Are you out of your fucking mind? The post garnered a great deal of support for the incumbent candidate, although a handful of followers insisted the numbers applied only to rich people. Yeah, 50 Cent is rich. Shortly after, he started another post seemingly to boast about his wealth. I just remembered I'm bankrupt, so I'm looking for a gracious loan. Can anyone help a brother out? Lol. He wrote alongside the photo of himself smiling. Also an actor and a businessman, Jackson was born in Queens. He's worth at least $110 million, as Forbes reported in 2012. He's richer now. 50 Cent joins a long list of Trump supporters, including Kirstie Alley, who recently voiced support for the president, citing his lack of politics as reasoning for her backing. I'm voting for Donald Trump because he's not a politician. I voted for him 4 years ago for this reason and shall vote for him again for the exact same reason, tweeted the actress. He gets things done quickly and he will turn the economy around quickly. There you have it, folks. There you have it.
So 50 Cent doesn't want to become 20 Cent.
Yeah, he doesn't want to become 20 Cent. I don't know, did 50 Cent endorse Trump last time around? I don't think so, no. I don't think so. I haven't checked, but I don't think so.
I haven't checked either.
I'm thinking that the peeps from the press who published those numbers, the projections on the Biden tax plan, they're probably kicking themselves right now. Like, well, why the fuck didn't we just shut up? Because yes, I've seen those numbers circulated a lot on social media, and yeah, sure, the very, very poor and the kind of upper middle class left-wing pricks in the cathedral media, they don't seem to see a problem with that. But those who made their wealth by working, and also the working class, they're like, are you sure,
yeah.
Mr. Biden?
Yeah,
That's kind
taxes are at least a more important aspect when it comes to American politics than it is here in Europe.
Yes.
And when you're vehiculating all around the press Biden's tax plan, it's a pretty simple math equation. What percentage are you talking about?
Now, 62% by U.S. standards is huge.
It is huge, considering that average working class in the worst case scenario in Europe is Denmark, as I reckon. They get taxed 52%.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're not going to talk about the effective tax rate when you include sales tax and everything else, but still.
Well, that figure doesn't include sales tax either. So
yeah, because not all states practice sales tax. But
yeah, but New York City does.
New York City does.
So it's 62% plus whatever sales tax has Mr. Cuomo for them, and what's that guy's name? De Blasio. De Blasio being that guy who wanted to forbid smoking in your own home. I mean,
yep. But on the same side, a lot of New York City landowners forbid you to smoke in the places that they rent to you. So he's pretty much parroting what the landowners are thinking.
I think you mean landlords rather than landowners.
Landlords, yeah.
But but there's still the option. You don't rent from that guy. Because I kind of strongly doubt that in the city of the mafia there isn't a place where you can that doesn't allow smoking. You know, kind of like when I was in Chicago back in 18, when there was, oh, you can't even smoke on the streets. Of course, nobody observed that one. And then you know, I found a very nice pizzeria owned by a bunch of Italian mobsters, which of course prohibited smoking inside, and of course they had great pizza because they actually had actual Italians in it making it. So yeah, and it was also cheaper because all they wanted was the cash flow in itself. They didn't really care about the profits of the joint itself. So yeah. New York Post, die in a fire. Twitter employees reveal deep hatred for Donald Trump. The tweets are running the asylum. Twitter senior executives have a long history of anti-Trump hatred. The Post review of dozens of accounts of top employees found the venom, vitriol, and in some cases vows to help Joe Biden across the finish line in next month's presidential election continue to live online, as the company earlier this week decided to censor New York Post's revelations about Hunter Biden's emails to a consultant for Burisma. Get him out, posted a senior reliability engineer on August the 18th. What a fucking baboon. One manager with almost 9 years on the job said he was quite keen to watch Biden crush Trump in the election, and that he hoped the president would be utterly humiliated while also suffered greatly from the Chinese flu. In another post, he fantasized about the president being put on a ventilator. He calls Trump a fucking idiot, and the voters who elected him hysterically fucking stupid people. These people aren't even creative with their cases, really. At the same time, the employee has been consistent cheerleader for his company's efforts to rein in the president on the platform and curb the spread of so-called misinformation. I'm really proud of how quickly we've worked to make this possible for the US elections. Others publicly wished the president harm. A Twitter engineering manager said Trump should die in a fire in a January 2017 tweet. A year later, he rang in the new year by saying, "Happy 2018, Donald Trump is dead." None of these comments have ever been flagged by Twitter or been subjected to any form of official sanction, of course, even as the social media giant dishes out discipline to others for sharing legitimate news stories that might hurt Biden. The company finally ordered the vicious tweet to be deleted on May the 2019, years after being posted. A consistent theme among the employees is a desire to see Trump defeated, and on like that it goes.
Well, that's gonna sit pretty badly for the publisher versus platform debate.
Yes, and for the upcoming hearings in the Congress with Jack Dorsey and the rest of the
Yes, particularly
squad.
because this is pretty uniform at the level of Twitter employees. So there was one of the, God knows how many VPs Twitter has, that that commented on the picture of the fly that sat on Mike Pence's head. So he said that flies are drawn to shit, and look how also tolerant they can be.
Yeah, well, in fairness, that's a pretty mild joke, because and then again the fly went on Kamala Harris's head as well. So you know, the fly is a bit bipartisan, isn't it? But yeah, you know, the fact that they're intolerant is not a particular surprise. The left has been very intolerant for, well, since there has been a left. What is a little bit more surprising is the willingness to be very open about it. You know, at least since Stalin's time, after Stalin's death, the left hasn't been so open about their desire to create gulags or to kill people or things like that. You know, they try to at least attempt to camouflage that desire in some sort of academic gobbledygook.
Unless you're with The Atlantic, where they are pretty honest about gulags and shit.
Yes, unless you're The Atlantic, yes. But, you know, The Atlantic, again, is even those people, yes, they say they want to abolish free speech and they want to create gulags, but then they provide some academic gobbledygook explanation for it.
Also, it's just a circle jerk of ideas within the left.
But, again, whilst The Atlantic is indeed a publication, so therefore it is in public, at least The Atlantic doesn't pretend to be a platform. They don't pretend to do something and then do something else. No, they are a curated venue where they publish only what the owners of the venue want, which is fine. So at least from that perspective, people should take note, and people are taking note. Because that's the thing. In the past, and by in the past I mean, I think until about 2017, there was still a propensity towards pretending that Twitter isn't that bad. You know? Because why? Because it was the platform for journalists, basically. You know? If you want the news, you would sign up to Twitter, because you would see other journalists there, and a lot of news first appeared on Twitter, then on Facebook, if they appeared on Facebook, usually first on Twitter, then in a cathedral media venue, and then on Facebook. That was usually the road that was traveled by a piece of news, whether it was true or not, whether it was disinformation or not, it didn't matter, with all news. But recently things have changed, because, and not just because competition emerged, like Parler or Gob or whatever, but also because Twitter has increased the list of people that they censor to the point that those people are enough to create their own competing venues.
Which is why Gab appeared, first of all.
Yes.
A lot of people got sick of getting censored.
And as a result, those who didn't catch up to this particular development, which is to say some employees of Twitter, some employees of the cathedral media, they didn't know this was happening. They're now learning it, which is a little bit too late, but maybe not too late. I don't know, we'll see about that. But they're only learning about it now, and they're like, Over the last 3 years, they lived in a bubble. They seriously believed that the majority view was the majority view on Twitter, which is simply not true. Even within the United States, about half of the population doesn't use social media at all. And of the half that uses it, 46 or 47% they use Facebook, 30-something they use Instagram, less than 10% use Twitter. But the proportion gets turned upside down when it comes to journalists. Like 90% of journalists use Twitter, or 83% of journalists, something like that, they use Twitter. So yeah, that created a very, very radicalized and radicalizing bubble, which is now slowly, step by step, being exposed to reality or to sunlight, and it burns.
It burns, and it's gonna hurt a lot.
One of the great advantages of the panicdemic is that this provided a serious blow to the press in ways that very few in the press are figuring it out. Very few. I've seen Daily Telegraph. They're smelling the coffee. Daily Telegraph is publishing publicizing dissident content about the cough, like 3 or 4 pieces a day. The dissident content printer went brrr. But they're the only ones. Other than I don't know any other mainstream cathedral outlet who are trying to reverse course on that, and all of the rest are full speed ahead towards the wall.
but you used the Daily Telegraph as an example, but Daily Telegraph is pro-Russian.
And the Independent is Russian owned, like KGB owned. So what? I mean, no, the Telegraph is not pro-Russian. Come on, give me a break. No, they're really not. The Guardian is pretty pro-Russian, especially when it comes to the pro-Russian topics enjoyed by the European Union. Then the Guardian is very, very pro-Russian, but don't tell them that because they'll cry. Miami Herald: Ghislaine Maxwell loses fight to keep her Jeffrey Epstein testimony sealed. The federal judge appeals court dealt Ghislaine Maxwell, the alleged madam to disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein, twin blows late Monday by declining to consolidate her appeals in numerous overlapping cases and striking down her effort to thwart release of controversial deposition she gave in a now settled civil lawsuit. The 3-judge Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit held more than 2 hours of oral arguments last week and issued a succinct Monday afternoon order holding that the lower court judge did not err in ordering the release of a 418-page deposition from April 16 that could shed new light on the Epstein empire. We have reviewed all of the arguments raised by defendant appellant Maxwell on appeal and find them to be without merit, the judges wrote, also turning away a request for for consolidation with Maxwell's criminal case in Southern District of New York. We deny the motion to consolidate this appeal with the pending appeal in the U.S. versus Maxwell. The ruling affirmed the decision over the summer by U.S. District Judge Loretta Preska to release hundreds of documents from a 2015 civil suit involving Maxwell and Epstein accuser Virginia Roberts Giuffre, I think. The case was settled in 2017, and the Miami Herald sued for the release of the document following its groundbreaking November 18 Perversion of Justice series, which spotlighted how Epstein escaped various punishments despite widespread accusations that he sexually abused underage girls. Epstein was arrested in July 19 and found dead in a jail cell the following month, determined to be a suicide. So they basically saying Epstein did not commit suicide. We are pleased that the Second Circuit's decision will allow the public access to documents, including Mrs. Maxwell's deposition, that have been kept secret for far too long, said Christine Volz, a partner in the law firm Holland and Knight, who argued on the behalf of our newspaper, the Miami Herald. So yeah, that's Sofa's witnesses right there. I think right in the first episode of the World Sofa Report, we said, yeah, probably the court will disagree with that. They did.
and they did. And the reason why they disagreed was that during the current hearings, she also perjured herself.
Did she? I didn't follow the exact hearing.
Yeah, she did, based on some report that I read just today, which goes slightly more in depth about the things that are well, the first pages of that deposition. So yeah, it's gonna get pretty fun.
Yeah, as I said in the first episode of the World Sofa Report, I'm looking forward to reading that. 418 pages. It's going to take me a month to read that, probably even more than that. But well, maybe we can narrow it down to maybe 50 pages, the most relevant part of them. But this is going to be fun. This is going to be fun. It cannot come faster enough. Can they speed up the procedure so we can read them before the election? Because, you know, I know a few Democrats, and I just need documents so I can Control F and just start looking. Mr. Biden, Mr. Clinton. There are quite a few Democrats who.
Well, they haven't gotten yet to the Clinton part, but the former Senate Majority Leader was part of the deposition.
Mr. Schumer.
No, not Mr. Schumer, the former.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember that chap's name.
Mitchell.
Mitchell, yes.
Mitchell.
Yes.
Well, Mitchell was noted in the deposition.
That's interesting. I wonder what Mr. Mitchell is doing lately. Maybe he has something to tell.
probably should get enough bricks to
yeah, I don't know. I think AG Barr would like to have a word with. I'm just saying. I don't know. I could be wrong. So yeah, Gibbs documents. Kudos to the Miami Herald. I mean, they fought this tooth and nail. Miami Herald started working on this story 3 years and a half ago. So yeah, the reason I'm emphasizing this is especially for our Romanian audience, who keep on pressing us on various investigations that the SOFA has started last year, basically. And we were very happy when the pandemic hit, because we're like, we can accelerate our investigations faster, but it's still gonna take time. And it's like, it's been a year, and we only seen a few small portions of it. Yeah, these kinds of things take time.
Yeah, they do take time.
They really do. I mean, Miami Herald with a budget of millions of dollars just for this investigation alone, and it took them 2 years and a half, 3 years. The SOFA is not that rich.
Yes, please give money to accelerate.
Yeah, but these things do take time, because there are legal terms. You have to wait for a certain period until an appeal passes. When you file for the Freedom of Information Act, which is almost the same procedure in the US as it is in Romania, there is 30 days or 60 days where you have to wait. If they don't reply, you have to press again, and then only after that you can sue, and it takes a few months until you actually get to see a judge. And all of these things take time. They really do.
Yes. The speed of bureaucracy.
Yeah, it's it's slower than union speed. At least at the union speed you can see the progress, but with bureaucracies it's basically just wait 6 months, and after 6 months you get your cause has been postponed, wait another 6 months, And then after 6 months, they're like, I think you have forgotten to pay a $1 fee at that particular office. So you have 6 months to pay for it. Well, I can pay it now. No, you have to wait 6 months. And then after a year and a half, they're like, oh yeah, there's the thing you requested. And then you work for another 6 months to actually sift through all of the things you requested. And then you have a breakthrough in the investigation. It just is what it is.
Yeah, the Americans have a saying, like molasses in January.
Yes.
Pretty much. But at least I think the molasses actually moves faster because the temperatures get warmer.
Yeah.
It starts flowing faster.
It's still faster than most bureaucracies.
Unlike bureaucracy.
Yeah, any bureaucracy really, because it's not specific to the United States. Really, any bureaucracy, at least in Europe, North America, and even South America.
At least in South America, with a well-placed stack of cash, you can slightly accelerate things faster.
Maybe, if you're lucky. It depends on who you're investigating.
That as well.
Because otherwise, you can with this, you can have an acceleration with a bullet through your head. Well, admittedly, that can happen in the U.S. too. Don't forget, Epstein did not kill himself. So
yeah, but Epstein didn't get killed with a bullet. He got killed by hanging.
He was suicided. Yes,
he was suicided.
Sometimes these things happen. The Daily Wire: San Francisco Board of Education Commissioner, merit is an inherently racist construct designed and centered on white supremacist framing. In a series of social media posts this week, a commissioner for the San Francisco Board of Education declared that merit is an inherently racist construct designed and centered on white supremacist framing. She added that we racially code our world based on implied beliefs that privilege whiteness. In a tweet thread, Commissioner Alison Collins first referenced a paper that analyzes how high-stakes standardized testing became the policy tool in the US that it is today, and discusses its role in advancing an ideology of meritocracy that fundamentally masks structural inequalities related to race and economic class, and also references radical leftist pseudo-historian Howard Zinn. The paper also states that high-stakes standardized testing arose out of racist and classist legacies. The historical roots of high-stakes testing is in racism, nativism, and eugenics raises a critical question. Why is that now, over 100 years after the first standardized tests were administered in the US, we have virtually the same test-based achievement gaps along the lines of race and economic class? Given the historical origins, well, the Democratic Party happened in the meantime, I'm just saying. Given the historical origins of standardized testing in the social efficiency movement, which sought to educate students according to a perceived future social roles, IQ testing, and the eugenics movement, there is no reason to believe that these testing systems could shake off their racist and classist legacies so easily, Collins tweeted. Please be mindful that merit is an inherently racist construct designed and centered on white supremacist framing that justifies who is and isn't worthy of education, safety, justice, or empathy, or basically humanity. When we say some kids deserve access to a quality education, we are also inherently some don't. Yes, so. When we say some schools are academic, we're saying others aren't. Well, because others aren't. When we say some cultures value education, we're saying some don't, which is obviously true. She then buttressed her argument by referencing the left-wing critical race theory, of course. These are what folks who are experts in critical race theory call binary thinking. Blah, blah, blah. These are always, we racially code our world, blah, blah, blah. This is also known as the white frame. And yes, this even applies to a majority Asian American school, of course. The honorary whites, right? Am I right, mate? The model minority myth only exists within the context of a continuum that pits people of color against one another, yet leaves the status quo unchecked. Fundamentally, the issue of selective enrollment is about access to resources and not justice. In this way, merit is not about fairness. Well, that's why it's called merit and not fairness. It's just another sorting mechanism to justify who does or who doesn't deserve access to resources, which is fine. According to San Francisco Unified School District, Collins was elected on the Board of Education in November 18. Prior to that, she worked as a community organizer for over 20 years. There you go. Here's the activist. The website notes that her father became one of the first black professors at UCLA, and that she co-founded the San Francisco Families Union, parent advocacy organization. Well, family is white, I'm just saying. She obtained a master's degree in education from San Francisco State University. So, standardized testing is part of whiteness and with a legacy in the eugenics movement, and okay, now do Planned Parenthood.
Merit be racist in she.
Ich so. Okay, fine. If that's the case, now do Planned Parenthood.
Yes, because Planned Parenthood, as we know, is an incredibly racist organization. That
No, it's not. No, it's a very loving organization that just happens to have 90% of its headquarters in majority black neighborhoods, and it just happens to be founded by a militant fascist feminist
and eugenist.
and eugenicist, yes. Who just happened to have been one of the great inspirations for the Third Reich. These are all just coincidences, of course.
Pure coincidences.
Pure coincidences, absolutely pure
Yes,
coincidences.
and Bill Gates has nothing to do with that.
Bill Gates has nothing to do with that. Margaret Sanger has a lot to do with that. So yeah, if this is the case, then the San Francisco Board of Education now should focus on Planned Parenthood. You know, if they're really, this particular individual, she has a background in community organizer, family union, parent advocacy organization. Well, I'm now do Planned Parenthood because it's also related to your field in which you profess to have an expertise in. So let's see what classist legacies are in the framework that you call Planned Parenthood. Other than that, come on, seriously. Oh, we're saying that some schools are academic, that means others are not. Yes. So?
Yeah, and let's remember that's in the context where the grades have already been dropped quite a lot, particularly after George W. Bush.
The No Child Left Behind.
No Child Left Behind policy.
Yes, which was one of those.
And still they try to move the bar so low, and still they don't manage to get the results they want because yes, genetics is inherently racist.
Yeah, and it's not just genetics. I mean, even she admits that she say, oh, but when we say that some cultures value education, we mean others don't. Yes, and that's okay because it's an obvious fact. Koreans like to be nerds. Others don't like to be nerds that much, and that's okay. And all of this is reliant on the kind of assumption that I always despised, and I still do despise, the idea that school is so fucking important. Sorry, there's no way you can convince me of that. I don't care how many, what grades you had in school. I don't care if you even went to school. I know a lot of very smart people who barely went to school, and I know a fuck ton of useful idiots who spent a lot of time in school, and in my opinion that's the problem.
In university, masters, doctorates, PhDs.
Yes, I mean there are people who are like in their mid-30s and they've never worked a single day, but they have a wall full of diplomas and all sorts of recognition about their academic value. I have no use for those people. Get in the helicopter, I don't care how much you went to school. You're a useless son of a bitch. Whereas, a mechanic, for instance, probably went to school for no more than maybe 12 years, usually 8, or even sometimes even less than that. But those are very useful people. And at least in the United States, the market rewards them. Well, nowadays here too. The market rewards that those people usually make more money than those who spent a lot of time in school. But if you mention this aspect, then you'll be called you'll be called a white supremacist again, because most mechanics tend to be white. Although that's not, of course, a rule, but there is they're definitely statistically overrepresented. But again, this is all about the assumption that education, in the institutionalized, state-endorsed sense, is important. It's not. It's just not. And it only determines access to resources in the way she's mentioning it only if you want to work in a bureaucracy. That's it. Most of the rest of the planet doesn't function like that. Yeah, sure, state bureaucracies, they tend to value your papers a lot more than...
Progressive credentialism, a significant issue that we're having in Europe as well. To varying degrees, but there are other countries that are pretty fucking terrible at this. For example, Belgium, the Netherlands, France.
The Netherlands, yes.
We in Romania are somewhere in the middle. The UK, surprisingly, is quite low in credentialism.
Yes. And you would be yes, and it is surprising given that the UK has the longest tradition in credentialism per se. Probably that's the reason, you know, that they've had enough time to figure it out that it's BS.
Yeah, but at least yes, there's still a market aspect in the US, and this is an example I've seen on former colleagues of mine. Well, I did go to university, but I never finished it. That's another completely different story. But those that I knew that went to university, we don't have any issues with people that go to STEM degrees. For example, a colleague of mine who was American came from a university in upstate New York, finished mechanical engineering. And a year and a bit after he finished, he worked several small jobs in order to gain experience, and now he's working on the U.S. submarine nuclear reactors.
Well, I'm sure he's not poor.
And he also managed to pay his student debt loans in record time. He managed to pay them off in he graduated in 2016. He's now debt free. Yeah, he paid about 70% of them, and we're talking about nearly $120,000.
No, not bad.
So he did manage to do great, and it's possible.
You know, there are those memes that circulate on the internet. You know, with the lady who is a gender studies expert.
That's exactly what I was thinking of.
And her perceivably illiterate classmate who is now an electrician and is debt free. That's kind of true. I mean, the average, actually, the starting wage for some electricians in some U.S. states is like $80,000 before taxes per year, but that's still better than almost all gender studies graduate who at best they start at $35,000, which is basically welfare level. I'm just saying. Yeah. Daily Wire: California State Senator Scott Wiener to introduce legislation allowing safe injection sites for drug addicts. Scott Wiener, Democrat from San Francisco, that goes without saying, announced Thursday his plan to roll out legislation that would allow safe injection sites in San Francisco and Oakland, citing the recent surge of drug overdoses in San Francisco, according to local CBS affiliate. He joined San Francisco's Democrat Mayor London Breed and San Francisco Health Director Dr. Grant Colfax during a press conference in Boeddeker Park to announce the proposal. I guess they're practicing proper social distancing as well, right? Wiener has long been an advocate for the sites which allow drug users to safely consume in the presence of medical professionals who are equipped with the medication naloxone to prevent overdoses. KPIX reported poor medical professionals have to supervise all of the fucking junkies. Wiener has been trying to get safe injection sites implemented since 2018. Though these two previous attempts were vetoed. Overdose death in San Francisco increased by 70% in 2019, according to Colfax, who said all signs point to this trend continuing in 2020.
I wonder why.
I wonder why. Maybe you have something to do with that. The primary culprit is the rise of doses of fentanyl, according to the city's Department of Public Health. We're in an emergency in San Francisco, he added. Breed referred to her sister who overdosed, saying when you have people who you know and love who struggle with addiction, the thing that you want most for them is you want a better life for them. You want them to be able to get help, and you want to make sure that the addiction doesn't take their life, and that's happened to me. We can't control people and their addiction, but what we can do is be there for them. And this is a way for being there for people. This is a way for providing a space that doesn't judge them, so that when they walk through the doors, they're not treated like a drug addict, they're treated like a human being. Well, human beings can be drug addicts. I'm just saying. Anthony Weiner, isn't this the same guy? Scott Wiener. Sorry, Anthony Weiner is the guy with the porn laptop. Yes. Scott Wiener, isn't this the guy who made the intentional transmission of HIV essentially legal?
Yeah, because he took it out from the criminal code. Yes. Yeah, of California.
And when I say that Democrats are pro-degeneracy, I'm being accused of being a far-right extremist. But this guy wants, it's okay if you intentionally give HIV to other people. Yeah, let's all have safe, legal injection sites. So now we force the medical professionals to keep oversight on all of the junkies in the cities on taxpayers' money. Shouldn't it be your mission to curb degeneracy rather than encourage it? Because again, this encourages
to this ideologically driven individual. It doesn't apply, but I know this framework because Canada was the first to implement the safe injection sites.
Right.
British Columbia in particular, Vancouver specifically,
Yes.
Vancouver,
Yes.
more like.
Vancouver is a special place. It really is.
Well, they're all on the west coast of North America, so
Vancouver isn't Vancouver that place that is the one of the rainiest human settlements on the planet, and they still have a shortage of water.
Yeah, the same Vancouver. But see, that woman, Mrs. Bray, actually makes a good argument that yes, you have to be there for people who have issues with drugs, but not in this way. And here we got into consideration that the U.S. dismantled a lot of the mental health institutions
Yes.
that used to exist
Yes.
by executing them, and now the mantra between psychiatrists is pretty much let us give as many medicines as we can in order to keep you neutered.
Mm.
And that's not just in the US, that's also in Canada as well. Rather than having institutions to actually help you deal with the addictions themselves, rather than outright supporting them as Scott Wiener wants to.
Yes, and this is something that is true in most of Western Europe as well. It's not true in Eastern Europe yet, and probably won't be true because there is no.
Let's hope so.
There is just no support here for abolishing the asylums, the psychiatry asylums. It has been tried, and every time. It managed to get 0 votes in the parliament usually. I mean, not even the initiator had the courage to put his name on it. But most of Western Europe and the entirety of North America, they committed this a mistake 40 years ago, I think, probably even earlier, no, 50 years ago, in the 70s, where they slowly abolished the mental health institutions. And they weren't replaced with anything. Because that's the problem.
That's the problem.
Because, okay, some of them were probably overspending. There was probably a lot of fraud in them, probably a lot of mismanagement. I'm sure that was the case, because it's always the case.
But you got to take into consideration what's the alternative.
Yeah, and the alternative is this, basically. We have state-supported mental illness. I don't think that's...
Yes, and particularly when in the current circumstance of the planet, where all those psychopathologies go brrrr, it's gonna get even worse. Well, he's actually right that during 2020 it's gonna get worse.
Yes.
But I wonder why.
Substance abuse of any kind has been on the rise in almost every country on earth, with very few exceptions, and you'd be surprised that those exceptions are, Belarus, Sweden, Mozambique, places that didn't cough, actually didn't panic because of the cough. Yes, substance abuse has been on the rise, and that will create further mental health problems down the line. In terms of mental health, some people will be paying the toll of the panicdemic for decades to come, and some of them will never be okay ever again. And because that's why I was laughing, as I was reading the statement from the health official, kind of like, yeah, whose fault is that? Because that's the same health official that recommended, cutting electricity from people who hold a party and things of that nature, right? So that's why I'm like, don't trust health officials, because they're usually wrong. They are, and some of them, maybe they should be physically hunted, maybe. CNN, modern aircraft ventilation systems aren't spreading viruses, DoD study suggests. A new study released last Thursday suggests that people don't need to worry about circulating air spreading coronavirus on airplanes. That's bullshit. The US Department of Defense supports earlier research showing the ventilation systems on aircraft filter the air efficiently and take out particles that could transmit viruses. The study, which was released without peer review, did not take into account other ways that people could catch the virus, including from others coughing or breathing directly on them, from surfaces, or from confined spaces such as restrooms. Well, actually, with the restrooms, I think airplane restrooms are probably the most sterile environments, but we'll skip that. The U.S. Transportation Command, the Defense Advanced Research of DARPA, and the Air Mobility Command uses Boeing 777 and Boeing 767-300 aircraft loaded up with sensors meant to duplicate the effect of a fully loaded passenger flight. Whatever, I'm not going to read the whole article. Isn't it a very interesting, this fluffy virus is really interesting. You can catch it at the church, you can catch it in the park, you can catch it at a private party, at a wedding.
At a wedding, yeah.
But you can't catch it at a hypermarket. You can't catch it at Walmart, God forbid.
But you can catch it at a restaurant as well.
Yeah, but only in small restaurants. Big chain restaurants, that's okay. But the small business owner restaurants, those are absolutely haram, right? You can catch it at a wedding, but you can't catch it at Walmart. You can't catch it in big restaurants. You can't catch it in the plane, which are also owned by multi-billion multinational corporations. It's such an interesting virus, isn't it?
Very curious indeed.
Very curious indeed. Now, on a more serious note, the study is bullshit. It is. It is.
It is bullshit, but it has good propaganda value. That Navy SEALs that got banned for not wearing a mask on that.
He can use
that
this one.
That is exactly what I was thinking. He can use this study in order to prove them your decision is bullshit, and now I'm gonna sue you for a few $1 million at least to fly with another company for a good long time from now on.
Yeah, for the rest of your life. I mean, with a few $1 million, you can basically fly for the rest of your life. But yes, it can definitely be used in court, at least to cast doubt. It doesn't even matter if it's deemed bullshit upon peer review, which I suspect it will, because it really is bullshit. But even that, it can still be used to cast doubt, to say, look, you made the decision without any evidence, and a little bit later on, after you made the decision and you apply it on me, there's further doubt that your hypothesis used by United Airlines is wrong. And it's the same company now, United Airlines. They ordered this study.
So nice way to shoot yourself in the foot.
Yeah, this will be interesting. Yes. Again, the lawfare component of the pandemic started maybe 2 months ago. About 2 months ago, we started seeing serious lawsuits against the governments for their stupidity when it came to the Chinese cough. But the lawfare component, of course, because it's lawsuits, it's going to last for years and years. I suspect by 2025 we would still be reporting about lawsuits related to the pandemic. At least by 2025, if not more than that. But strictly on a virology point, it's utter nonsense now. And we've seen, at least in this country, we've seen first-hand evidence. Planes taking off from Madrid with 2 or 3 people having the Chinese cough. By the time they landed in Romania, 20 people had the Chinese cough. And they all coughed. They're all fine. Maybe some of them are now back in Spain or somewhere else. It's just a cough problem.
No, but actually you're missing the point here. So they were on to prove that the aircraft filtration systems actually take any mediums for the virus to be transported out. So I actually kind of agree with them that the filtration systems actually do work, but when they don't take into consideration when somebody either sneezes directly on you or when you're in close proximity to a person that is infected.
I don't know. I'm very skeptical, and the reason I'm very skeptical is because, and you know that this too, because you traveled quite a lot. On longer distances, both transatlantic and within the Middle East
and transcontinental.
We've both been for long periods of time in airplanes, and as a standard, when you would end up at the destination, the same day or somewhere the next day, you would cough a little bit or sneeze a little bit. You'd definitely catch some sort of bug from the plane. It just is what it is. It's what's the scientific term? It's a systemic risk. Just like any other systemic risk, going out in the streets could get you killed. A car could hit you.
Well, even staying in the house could get you killed.
Oh yeah, even staying in the house could get you.
If it's your time to go, it's gonna come.
If Yahweh
regardless
wants,
what you do.
If Yahweh wants, yes, you'll be sleeping in the shower and hit your head over the sink and you'll be dead. So that's a systemic risk as well. And this whole idea of trying to use prove scientifically that no, this is how it's all safe. This is the childification of our culture. Really, it really is a childification. We need a study to tell us things, because otherwise we won't believe it's safe. Well, nothing is safe. Tough.
No, it's just that people want to be lied to. That think that the things that have to be done or can be done are safe. Because this is pretty much the common thread I've seen during this pandemic, is that people are afraid of death, and they're scared shitless of death, without taking into considerations that you can die from absolutely any cause. Case in point, you can have a brain aneurysm, something that you can never trace, you can never find out, no matter how many trips to the CT you go. And it could happen at one point. You could simply fall on the floor, that aneurysm breaks, and you're dead. You can't trace that. You can't find out if you have it, as I said before. So then
that's a very unpreventable thing.
Yeah, and I've actually had a close friend that died at the age of 16 due to a brain aneurysm. He just simply fell on the stairs, hit his head on one of the steps, and he didn't break his skull open, but that broke the aneurysm, and he died at the age of 16. And he was pretty healthy. He did rugby, so he didn't do any steroids or other stuff like that. And he still went.
Yeah, it's called life. It's nobody is immortal. At some point, we're all gonna die, and that's okay. Now, 99.97% of people who ever lived on the planet are already dead. It just is what it is. And this is the part that I really despise in the current environment. This expectation of people to live forever, I don't know. I was watching just before I came here to do this podcast, I was watching an interview published by Nigel Farage on Facebook with an 83-year-old lady in the United Kingdom. That lady had more balls than most of the men with muzzles that I see on the streets. You see? Yeah. Because she was like, who's gonna pay for all of this damage? I certainly won't, because I'll be dead. And you know, that 83-year-old lady was a lot more realistic about how things work in reality, as opposed to the social media netizens who, I don't know, they genuinely seem to think that they can live forever. Without even realizing that their own life expectancy is being destroyed this way by staying panicked indoors all the time.
Yeah, but there's also on this topic where you see the clear separation between people who lean to be more conservative and people who lean more to the left. Is that people who lean more conservative are the ones who actually do live with this reality that they're going to die at some point, part of the Judeo-Christian education that most of them got. Yes. While the leftists who tend to be
more anthropocentric, they can control everything. They can control nature itself. Well, the best we can do is tame nature sometimes, but you can't control nature. What's even more interesting is that at the same time there is that propaganda that, you know, conservatives are those who tend to be more safety oriented, whereas liberals are the risk takers. And I've always said that that's utter nonsense. That's just not how this works. It's just that conservatives don't take unnecessary risks. Yeah. But other than that, you know, conservatives accept systemic risk as a standard. And you know, well, so there's the Chinese cough. Well, can it be stopped? No. Is it endemic? Yes. Okay. Okay. It just is what it is.
Yeah, just a cough, bro.
Just a cough, bro. Yes. Speaking of just a cough, some people don't cough. Well, they do cough, but they're still better off because of that. Merco Pressa, the IMF admits Brazil's economy is doing better than forecasted, but warns about that and the second COVID-19 wave. Brazil's economy is set to shrink by 5.8% in 2020. That's quite a lot. The International Monetary Fund said on Monday, revising up an earlier forecast about but warning the country faced exceptionally high risk. The economy is projected blah blah blah, following by a partial recovery of 22.8% in 21, the IMF said. The report released on Monday revised upwards the more pessimistic forecast of a 9.1% contraction in June. It praised the right-wing government of President Jair Bolsonaro for its swift and substantial response to the economic crisis prompted by the China virus pandemic. The government increased health spending, boosted financial support for state governments, extended state-backed credit lines, and introduced employment retention schemes which helped protect formal jobs during the lockdown. The strong policy response averted a deeper economic downturn, stabilized financial markets, and cushioned the effects of the pandemic on the poor and the vulnerable. However, it warned that given a sharp rise in primary fiscal deficit, gross domestic debt is projected to jump to around 100% of the GDP in 2020, remaining high over the medium term. Risks are exceptionally high and multifaceted, the fund warned, including a second wave of the pandemic, long-term scarring from a protracted rapid recession and vulnerability to confidence shocks given Brazil's high level of public debt. The South American giant of 212 million people has been hit hard by the new China cough, with more than 145,000 people killed, the second highest death toll worldwide after the United States. Well, actually it could be the third, the first one being China, but you wouldn't know that. The IMF recommended the government be prepared to provide additional fiscal support if health, economic and social conditions were to worsen. Almost 12 million jobs were lost due to the crisis between February and July, of which over 7 million were in the informal sector. The unemployment rate is still rising and reached 13.8% in the quarter between May and July. That's not really that high by Brazil standards, though other indicators such as industrial production show improvements in August from the previous month. Consumer spending is also on the rebound, though that is largely thanks to emergency stimulus checks of 600 reais a month. The government has been paying to around 60 million Brazilians, about a third of the population. The payments were halved this month and are set to expire at the end of the year. While some recent indicators are encouraging and the authorities expect a strong rebound next year, it may take some time for employment incomes and poverty to return to pre-China virus levels, the IMF reported. In the meantime, Bolsonaro offered a ringing endorsement to Donald Trump, of course. So who knew? All I was hearing in the press was that Bolsonaro is doing a terrible job with both with the China virus and with the economy of Brazil. So you're saying the entirety of the press lied?
Well, they didn't lie, but they expected. They said that they did a bad job because Bolsonaro didn't do any lockdowns, didn't do any tracing by using apps.
Yeah, good luck doing that in Brazil, man. Come on. I mean, really?
Well, that's a standard that they considered Bolsonaro was doing a bad job.
Right.
While he was one of the first of the world leaders to push this idea that, along with Belarus and Trump as well, that the Chinese cough may be pretty bad, but starving is actually worse.
Is worse. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, he didn't do anything, but just like in the United States, Brazil is a federal republic, and some of the states behaved kind of like New York, and some others behaved kind of like South Dakota. It's very similar in Brazil as well. It was very interesting because it also followed a similar pattern. The Brazilian states with a more who praised themselves on their diversity, read leftism, behaved kind of like New York. And the rest of them who had real diversity, but no leftism, behaved kind of like South Dakota. And whilst at the beginning, in the first 3 weeks, the latter seemed to be faring a lot worse. Now it's more than obvious for anyone not insane that the latter had a point and the former were brutally insane themselves. And now, of course, what they really hate on Bolsonaro is because he halved those payments and set an expiry date for them, is not willing to debate any prolonging of those, which forces eventually the governors, even in the most insane states, Brazilian states, to kind of follow the Bolsonaro guidance rather than what their real masters at the Wuhan Honk organization would tell them. So but again, I was reading in the press that Bolsonaro is doing a terrible job, and 5.8% drop may look terrible, but when you compare to anyone in Europe, it's not really that bad.
Yeah, anyone in Europe that sees realistically double-digit drops.
I mean, single-digit drops. It's going to be for everyone in Europe, and with the exception of Sweden, which is probably going to be -2 or -3, no more than that, no lower than that. Everyone else is -7, -8. -10, -11. Germany is still claiming that they'll be at -8, -12. Meine Genosse, -12. Trust me. I don't care what the Ministry of Economic Affairs say. No, it's going to be -12. Trust me. Nobody's going to buy German shit for a while. It just is what it is. You wanted Merkel, Queen Merkel. Ask her to feed you. So minus 5.8% by Brazil standards. That's not a catastrophe. Brazil has been through a lot worse economically than this, and it's still there. And with some confident leadership from Bolsonaro, it's not going to be that terrible.
Yeah, which matters a lot.
Yeah, it does matter.
In the context of Brazil, where historically they had some pretty gigantic fuck-ups in terms of the economy.
Yeah, I mean, you're a lot more confident, even as a Brazilian citizen, not to mention as a foreign investor, when Bolsonaro is there, than when compared to, well, Lula. I mean, really, it's just Lula, man. I mean, would you put your money in Lula's place? No. But, when Bolsonaro is there, I follow Jair Bolsonaro on Facebook, of course, and I love the guy because he trolls the Wuhan Honk organization every single day. And with full tags with all of the directors and puts in statistics from Brazil. And you see a lot, and sometimes a lefty comes in and whines, and Bolsonaro personally replies and then deletes the comment and only puts the screenshot. and he never deletes their name. So ordem e progresso. Yes, ordem e progresso. Alrighty, let's take a break. We'll be listening to a Romanian band from Bucharest, Acral Necrosis. The name of the song is Pandemic Dominion, because I found it very specific, very fitting for this period of time. The song is from 2011, but it's more relevant now. Buy their songs if you want. And I don't know, on top of the song, I think I'm going to put some footage from Generalized Quarantine, either from here or from Bucharest. I don't know. Let's listen to the song and we'll be back. Right, so we're back. We've listened to a little bit of Romanian metal. We'll be listening for a lot more Romanian metal. One of the nice things about this period is that now the couch is being contacted by other artists. We want to be on the anti-cough podcasts too. Right, so Europe, God help us. The Sun, thousands of anti-mask protesters descend on London calling for lockdown end hours after capital's tier 2 restrictions. Thousands of anti-mask protest descended on London calling for freedom as the capital entered tougher lockdown rules. The group marched through Hyde Park and Oxford Street demanding an end of the restrictions. They held up placards reading COVID-19 equals control and lockdown kills whilst shunning protective face masks. The agitators were flanked by police officers as they made their way through central London. Jeremy Corbyn's brother Piers, who was previously fined £10,000 for organising a rally, was also in attendance. He could be seen shouting into a megaphone with his fist raised in the air. The group is calling for an end of face masks and wants to stop any coronavirus vaccines. They also held up a huge banner demanding no social distancing measures under the hashtag Our Movement. It came as Londoners woke up in tougher coronavirus restrictions under Tier 2 lockdown rules. Different households have now been banned from drinking together inside pubs and meeting in each other's homes. Revelers last night clashed with the cops before the new rules came into effect as they packed out streets in the capital. Other areas moving into Tier 2 include Essex, Elmbridge, Barrow-in-Furness, York, North East Derbyshire, Erewash and Chesterfield. Lancashire yesterday joined Liverpool in the toughest lockdown measures in Tier 3. Under the new rules, people are banned from mixing with other households indoors or outdoors. Businesses such as leisure centres and bars not serving food must close, but restaurants and schools can stay open. A battle of the North is still rumbling on between Boris and Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham over placing the city under Tier 3 restrictions. Now, Andy Burnham lost the political battle with Boris Johnson, but he lost the battle, but he might have won the war because Andy Burnham, the mayor of Manchester, who is a lefty from Labour, basically managed to get it out there that it's mainstream to question the wisdom of the Chinese cough measures. I mean, and as a result of that, the Telegraph, October the 20th, title, "I'm almost starting to think this whole pandemic really is a conspiracy," with the subtitle, "Our continuing oppressive response to a virus that almost every human survives is making less and less sense." What I'm trying to say here is that this is not a left-right issue. It's a sanity versus insanity issue. And Corbyn's brother, as well as the senior content editor from the Telegraph, and everyone in the streets is on the side of sanity. The government is your enemy. It just is what it is.
Yeah, imagine how hard the Conservatives fucked up in order for Labour to make sense after...
This hasn't happened since the 50s, I think. In the 50s, there was some criticism on the Tory leadership by Labour, which sort of made sense. And also when the Labour was Eurosceptic. When Labour was Eurosceptic, that was also a time when Labour made sense on an issue. So it's been decades since Labour made sense on anything. But now they made sense on this one. And the reason they make sense on this one is because it's not a left-right issue. It really isn't. You don't have to be a libertarian, you don't have to be a leftist, you don't have to be a right-wing, you just have to be not insane to figure out that, the Tory leadership, Boris, fucked it up. Now, he probably won't fuck it up on Brexit, but he fucked it up on this one. Really huge fuck up.
Yes, and it's actually impressive that during the first lockdown, which was self-imposed by the people, not by decree, like as it is right now, then at that point you could blame the people that they subjected themselves to that regiment of staying inside the house anywhere between 14 days in the best case scenario, all up until 4 or 5 months for those who consider themselves to be vulnerable. But now it's the fault of the state. And as a consequence of the first lockdown, as we've seen, because the protests weren't just in London, they were also in other cities, where this article conveniently missed out. They kind of got it right, seeing as okay, a lot of people went into shops like Asda or in Tesco or in Waitrose, so because those remained open, make no mistake about that, and nothing happened. So if the population started questioning the virus itself, which is actually a good idea.
As I said, this cough has a political conscience. You don't catch it at Tesco, you only catch it at the pub.
Yeah.
But only in smaller pubs that don't sell food. The bigger pubs that tend to be chain owned or owned by a multinational corporation, usually a Russian investor. You don't catch it there, but you do catch it at the smaller pub. You catch it at the church. By the way, where are the piles of bodies of supermarket workers? Supermarket workers should have been, well, not all of them dead, but we should have heard at least of 1 or 2 funerals per country of a supermarket worker. This city has, the city we're living in, de facto is about 550,000 people ish, maybe a little bit more, but not by much. I've asked in 29 supermarkets so far whether any colleague of them died. Everyone looked at me like, are you insane? No, we're all fine, man. Of those 29, in half of them, at least one colleague coughed. Some of them officially diagnosed, some of them not officially diagnosed, but definitely fitting the case definition. So they did cough, but nobody died. So I kind of have to side with the peeps in the streets. And again, we mocked the Brits in the first episode of the World So Far Report for clapping for NHS and all of that crap, which was utterly insane. It was. But this time around, they're correct, because, and then this time around is not their insanity, it's the insanity of the state. Now, of course, the title offered by the Telegraph is sort of tongue-in-cheek, because it's the author, the senior content editor, is not arguing for a conspiracy. They're basically arguing that there's so much stupidity around and in the government bureaucracies that at some point it becomes indistinguishable from from a dystopian conspiracist world, which is true.
Yeah, and also the answer to the protest was disproportionate. That the police harassed people at the protest in London to maintain proper social distancing and shit. But when yesterday some hundreds of Nigerians went out on the streets to celebrate, I think one of their guys won an election back in Nigeria. There were just a few bobbies around, but they didn't enforce any social distancing. They didn't even bother the people while they were blocking streets.
Oh yeah, of course.
And they did absolutely nothing. So let's see. You don't get a Chinese cough when you're from a underrepresented minority.
From the BAME group.
From the BAME, yes.
From the BAME group. Yeah, well, you can spin it the any way you want. If you're a lefty, you can say that the police is racist because they know that the Chinese cough spreads faster in the BAME community and they don't do anything to protect them, so therefore white supremacy and shit. Or you can say that the police are a bunch of fucking retards, and they basically enforce these stupid law diktats by number 10 only on people that they would know they would be compliant with such disdainful nonsense, which tend to be white. You can spin them in both cases, and in both cases it would be apparently correct. In reality, it's just nobody knows what they're doing. That's the reality. There is no conspiracy, it's just they have no idea what they're doing. And the path of least resistance is, of course, the one chosen most of the time by any bureaucracy, and that includes the police, because the police is still a bureaucracy. At the end of the day, we're seeing we're seeing the same thing here, with the whole mask mandate outside, which there is no mask mandate outside. But if you don't know, if you're not literate enough into the how legislation works, you can find yourself harassed by some semi-literate police officer. But if you start quoting your legislation, you fuck off, mate. Just fuck off, mate. That's how this works, and that's how it works in Britain. That's how it works in Spain. That's how it works pretty much anywhere. Republic World. Anti-lockdown measures demo turns violent in Prague. Public gatherings of more than 6 are also banned, but up to 500 people are allowed to demonstrate if they are divided into separate groups of 20 and wear face masks. I mean, this whole thing, I mean, can you imagine? 500 people can demonstrate, but not more than 6 can gather. But if they're in groups of 20 and wear face masks, then that's okay, then no China virus. Czech police on Sunday used tear gas and the water cannon to disperse hundreds of protesters who attacked them after a rally Sunday in Prague against government restrictions to slow the spread of cough. Police rescue services said at least 20 were injured in the clashes, which erupted after a few thousand people, including soccer and ice hockey fans, rallied at Old Town Square to condemn the restrictions that include the ban of sports competitions and closure of bars and restaurants. Public gatherings of more than 6 are banned, but up to 500 are allowed. Many of the demonstrators had no face coverings after police said that their number surpassed 500. The organizers ended the rally, but some protesters remained at the square, throwing flares, beer bottles, stones, and various objects at the riot police. Now, the SOFA has received word that there is some video and photographic evidence that the violence was actually provoked by plainclothes policemen, and anyone who has been living in the Intermarium is not surprised by to learn this kind of thing. That's usually how the state does these kinds of things. Maybe I should make a video about how to work at protests. I'm now only learning how to organize bigger protests. I haven't done so ever before May this year, but I know quite a lot on how to manage a big protest, because I did that multiple times. So, you know, and in this case, the organizers failed at having their own security. Having your own security at the protest that you're organizing is very, very helpful, precisely so they can recognize those that glow in the dark because they make specific moves, or they wear specific type of clothes. They just glow in the dark. They really do glow quite a lot.
Yeah, just as it happened, you have the footage of that dude from the very first protest that happened in Romania against the lockdown. There was a guy with there was a guy with
glowing gloves.
With glowing green gloves, with a ginormous mask, and he was wearing Oxfords.
Yes, and towards the end of the protest, the wind caught his ID, which was said Ministry of Internal Affairs. I mean, yes, but okay, that was pretty. That guy was pretty amateurish, and then he thought he would blend in better the second day of the protest when he came in without the gloves, but with the same huge muzzle on, and with the same Oxfords, and with the same suit and the same ID. And for some reason, nobody will recognize me now. Not to mention that he didn't fit the age pattern either. He was pretty old, for a crowd that was definitely skewing young. For obvious reasons, when we make these kinds of protests, we don't want to kill people. We just want to make the government uncomfortable. So that's why we don't invite 80-year-olds. But apparently, the Ministry for Internal Affairs doesn't mind that. Similar protests have occurred, are occurring as we speak. Actually, maybe by the time I'm publishing this, you'll be having more information than I do right now. A very similar protest is occurring right now in Dublin. The organizers there, I want to meet the organizers from there, because they did a tremendous job at OPSEC. I tried to track down their digital footprint, and it's almost none of it. Almost none of it. Even those from Ireland who are experienced in going to protest, they're like, who organized that one? Yeah, I have to go, see ya. They learned from the press that it was happening. I want to meet the organizers from that particular protest, because I need to replicate that here several times. But these kinds of protests are perfectly legitimate. Now, with the cases of the violence, whether it was provoked by plainclothes policemen or not, I suspect it was, because this is a pretty standard procedure. I still think that in some cases, especially if they come in with the water cannons and things like that, it's self-defense. It is. And, at the end of the day, the government is your enemy. It just is what it is. I mean, if the government can tell you what clothes you can wear and who you can meet and who you cannot meet, that comes a point where there is no room for civilized debate. just like the Serbians did.
Yep,
The Serbians, in July, Mr. Vucic were like, we're putting you all back into quarantine. And a few Serbians showed up with Molotovs and bats and all sorts of other wooden objects and very strong objects, and explained to Mr. Vucic very calmly by burning shit down that quarantine is unscientific. And Mr. Vucic understood. And therefore there are no restrictions in Belgrade. Because, politicians aren't bad people who just have to speak their language. And they'll understand. And they'll obviously agree with the science. As long as you can argue your science properly. Which, yes, sometimes may mean burning shit down. It just is what it is.
Yes, as long when states lose the monopoly on violence, it's when the shit actually gets done.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly in these times when everybody's accused to be more restrictive.
Mm.
As we've seen, the UK, Prague, and now we're in the next example Dublin as well, and now in the next example we're going to have Belgium.
Mm-hmm.
The country that doesn't exist.
Yeah, well, Belgium is a British creation in the end. Thomson Reuters, Belgium to close all bars and restaurants for a month and imposes a night curfew. I'll need explanations for that. All Belgian bars and restaurants will be forced to close for 4 weeks, the federal government said on Friday, in order to tackle a surging second wave of the cough, with hospitals close to running out of beds. I'm not believing that for a second.
Yes.
The Belgian government also decided to impose a curfew from midnight to 5 a.m. for a month. This virus is affecting our country in a very hard way, said Belgian Prime Minister, whoever, I can't pronounce that. The coming weeks will be very difficult, but we must take those measures to avoid the worst. Okay. The measures will last at least 4 weeks from October the 19th, with a review of their impact after 2 weeks. The measures also include reducing to just one the number of people Belgians can see at close proximity outside their homes, and enforcing work from home for most employees. Selling alcohol will be forbidden after 8 p.m. Belgium followed the Netherlands, which will close its bar and restaurants on October the 13th, and France in imposing a nighttime curfew. That's fake news. The country is now in the highest 4th level of its emergency scale. The Prime Minister said tonight's decisions were a step back towards more restrictions, but were necessary. I'm fully aware that those measures are very severe. 5 weeks after reopening, Belgian universities will have to switch mostly to online teaching from Monday, although schools will remain open for now. The nation of 11 million people has Europe's second highest infection rate per capita after the Czech Republic. New infections are doubling every week, hitting a peak of 8,500 on Monday. Oh, that's a lot of cough. And probably more than 10,000 on Tuesday. Cough. In Brussels, home to European Union institutions and the headquarters for Western Military Alliance NATO, 22% of the tests turn out positive. Cough. The number of patients in intensive care units has doubled over 11 days to 327 on Thursday. That's weak. Belgium's maximum capacity of 2,000 might be fully exhausted by mid-November at the current rate of increasing infections. The health authorities have said, but some others get cured or die. It's clearly an exponential increase that we're seeing today. No, it's not. It's a geometric progression. Mathematics. All Belgian hospitals will have to reserve half of their beds for cough from October the 26th, meaning non-urgent procedures and care will have to be delayed or cancelled. That's going to kill a lot more people than the China virus. The China virus has claimed 10,283 lives in Belgium, one of the highest per capita fatality rates in the world. Not just one of the highest, but also doubled in Sweden, which did nothing. Yes. First of all, I need some explanation on this one. Is the China virus more contagious at 3 a.m. than at 3 p.m.?
I came with an explanation while I was bouncing back ideas with a friend of ours. Why do they impose nighttime curfews? You see, because the virus originates from a biolab from Wuhan, China.
Okay.
The virus was born at the Chinese time zone, so that's why during the night in Europe it's more contagious.
Right. So from birth time, it has a specific time on the UTC way of measuring time, which happens to be in the middle of the night in Europe. So, right, that actually makes a lot more sense than the government explanation. So yeah, first of all, this one with the night curfew, which I really don't see any sense for it. And then there is this one. We're not going to sell alcohol after 8 p.m. So you get more China virus if you buy alcohol at 9 p.m. Rather than 7 p.m.
No, but you see, they did that in order to not encourage alcohol consumption at home.
Right, but we all get crowded at 7 p.m. and just buy it all before it closes.
But like in the previous news article on the UK, you apparently don't get China virus when you go to shops in order to buy stuff.
Yeah, but you do get China virus if you try to buy alcohol at 9 p.m., which is after the closing hours imposed by the federal government, which, by the way, by Belgian law, doesn't have the authority to do that. So, good luck with the lawfare, because they're all bullshitting there. That's how I know that it's not a conspiracy and rather a conjuration of stupidity. Because when you come to the point where you try to, because information about these things is not censored anywhere. So you're basically trying to lie to me about the content of the law. That's when I know you're really full of shit. and not just and full of shit by panicking. You're basically, a lot of these bureaucrats are panicked. Either because they figured it out that they made a mistake and they can't back off now without being hanged in the public square, which they should, some of them, or they're panicked as in they still believe that this is the some end of civilization kind of disease, which is really not just a cough pro. But yeah, I mean, this whole thing with you can't buy alcohol then. Because people who want to buy alcohol will just crowd the stores earlier, and I thought that crowding is what spreads the China virus. I mean, in the end, these kinds of policies don't really make any good, and if anything, they may end up making things worse.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they missed the irony of that aspect.
Yes, and with non-critical, what they call it, non-urgent procedures and care will have to be delayed or cancelled. That's going to kill a lot more people then, because screening for cancer, that's not urgent, technically speaking. But if you
or dialysis is not also not urgent.
Yes, dialysis is not urgent either. But postponing it or delaying it enough ends up with you in the grave. Yeah, admittedly, you're not gonna cough.
You're not gonna cough, at least. At least you're not gonna cough.
At least you're not gonna cough.
Which is what's important for these people.
Yes. Just like in the US, suicides among very young people are up by 100% in certain counties, or even more than 100%. Yeah, sure, they didn't cough. Terrible. This one's cute. Daily Mail: couple in Milan fined 360 pounds for kissing in the street because they removed their face masks, and that breaches coronavirus restrictions. A couple in Milan were fined, I guess, 500 euros for kissing in the street, as removing their masks breached the restrictions, the local reports claimed. After kissing in public on their way to a restaurant, the engaged couple found themselves surrounded by 4 officers, according to their own account of the incident. The couple, comprised of a 40-year-old Italian man and a Polish woman who only knew her native language and English, had been engaged for 2.5 years. Despite showing the officers evidence of this on the smartphone, such as photos, videos, and messages, the couple claimed they continued to be questioned. The problem arose when the officers found their documentation to show 2 separate addresses. Once they had been identified by the police, the couple said they were fined 400 euros on October the 9th, as per the Italian government's coronavirus guidelines. According to the report in Libero, the fine was due to the couple's failure to comply with the law that states people must wear masks within 1 meter of each other. However, under this law, there is no obligation for people who live with one another to wear a mask when together in public and within 1 meter. The alleged offenders said that they were alone and that there was no one nearby, but despite this, they were still fined. This latest incident comes months after Italian police shared a video in which they used drones to hunt down a man lying alone on a beach before issuing him with a fine. The police officers could be seen flying a drone to survey the beach from above before finding the unaware sunbather and then closing in on him while riding quad bikes to cover larger areas. Shared by the city's public relations office, the video was intended to demonstrate how the police were enforcing the nationwide lockdown rules and covering large areas like parks and beaches using drones and all-terrain vehicles. However, the video and photos had the unintended effect of prompting a backlash against the police's heavy-handedness. Comments under the images said the police were going too far and that the man was already practicing distancing before the police surrounded him. This is one of further argument that this is not a conspiracy and just a conjuration of stupidity. Because if you want to convince the plebs, this is not the way.
Well, at least the Italians are now occupying the 2nd place in being so sympathetic in enforcing these rules. the top is being taken by the Australians who use helicopters in order to promote social distancing.
Yes, but at least with Australia, I can forgive them because it's a penal colony. So you know the tradition obliges. But in the case of Italy, I mean, come on, such technology wasn't even used to hunt down the fucking mafia, you know. So there's that. But yeah, a fine for kissing your fiance in the street. Kudos to the Polish woman for not beating the crap out of the police officers. I'm serious about this because seriously, if that were to be happening here, I'm pretty sure I would prefer to be criminally charged with what's it called? What would be called in English? Battery or something like that, you know, against the police officer. Because I would beat the crap out of the officer. I mean, give me a fucking break, mate. Seriously, I'm not joking at all, because that's exactly what these kinds of zealous officials they deserve. That's what they deserve. I mean, seriously, if you seriously believe that it is legitimate, I don't care if it's legal, if it's legitimate. If you think it's legitimate to issue a fine to an engaged couple kissing in the street, no, you deserve to be beaten heavily. Maybe occupy an ICU bed to recover. Maybe that would be a good enough lesson. And yes, I'm instigating to violence here. Give me a freaking break, mate. I mean, this is beyond honk. This is insane. Now, admittedly, by Italy standards, is not exactly a top tier kind of insanity. Yeah, we've seen a lot worse from Italy, not just with this pandemic, in the previous years as well. They enforce these kinds of petty stuff a lot more than their criminal code. So, you know, I mean, in a way, I understand why it's happening, but on the other hand, this the publicization of these kinds of abuses is what's good, because it's finally getting the Italians to hold on a second, mate. Yeah, no.
So to totally chasing a guy in the middle of in the middle of a beach alone.
I mean, if anything, the police is the one that increases the risk of transmission of the China virus, because you just didn't leave the guy alone. The standard, well, this one is back to the, what do we call it, the airstrip 1, sex banned indoors for tier 2 couples living apart, number 10 confirms. Couples living apart in areas with tier 2 restrictions are not allowed to have sleepovers unless they are in a support bubble. Downing Street confirmed today. Boyfriends and girlfriends will be able to meet outdoors in tier 2, but are expected to adhere to social distancing rules such as hands, face, and space. They must also adhere to the rule of 6. The Prime Minister's official, so no orgies, only six people in the orgy and only outside, right? The Prime Minister's official spokesman told a briefing of Westminster journalists, the rules on household mixing in tier 2 set out that you should mix with your own household only unless you form the support bubble, and that obviously does apply to some couples. A support bubble is a network between a single person home and one other household of any size according to government rules. And how do you enforce this shit? Asked why there is no exemption for people in established relationships, he replied, because the purpose of the measures that were put in place is to break the chain of transmission between households, and the scientific advice is there's greater transmission of the virus indoors. Asked if couples in tier 2 can meet outside, he said yes, as it would set out by the guidance that was published this week. The ban on household mixing is a relation to indoors, and outdoors the rule of 6 applies. He also said people living in tier 2 areas should not go to tier 1 areas to socialize indoors, of course, and that's how do you enforce that again? He added, as has been the case throughout this pandemic, whether in following guidance or more recently when we placed it into law, you should have behave at all times in the basis of the tier that you live in. Of course, that's gonna work. Okay, this means okay, well, I get it. Again, how do you enforce this? Physically, how do you enforce this?
I wouldn't actually ask that question in the case of Airstrip 1.
No, I will, because I don't think it can enforce it. Not even in Airstrip 1.
They're not going to enforce it, but they're going to try to enforce it. Do something ridiculous like set up police filters, which happened during the first lockdown.
Yeah, okay, but how do you enforce it? Because there is no such thing as the national ID in Britain. Where is your residence? Wherever I say it is. How do you check that?
Well, they actually can. If you provide them your national insurance number, that's actually connected to the place that you're living in. But they have to check that through the centralized database. which is
how long does that take? How many
takes a
people?
while.
Yeah, as I'm saying, how many people can you check in an hour? One, maybe two, maybe five.
But they're going. But considering that we're talking about SG1, they are going to try.
I don't think they're even going to try. Now let me put it this way: suppose this is nothing about. Suppose this isn't a pandemic context. Suppose this is from the Combating Degeneracy Act of 2020. And the Combating Degeneracy Act of 2020 would deem certain areas of the United Kingdom as more prone to degeneracy and less prone to degeneracy and somewhat prone to degeneracy, right? Three-tiered. And the law would say that if you live in the very prone to degeneracy area, you're not allowed to go to a less prone to degeneracy area because you would spoil it with your degeneracy. And as a result, it would enforce rules such as this one. If you're not legally married in the church by the blessing of the king and practicing fuck, which is fornication under the consent of the king, then you would be jailed or fined or whatever, as per the Combating Degeneracy Act of 2020. Suppose the majority Conservative Parliament would adopt such a piece of legislation. Wouldn't that trigger a lot of protests? I suppose it would, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
then why the fuck aren't you all in the streets protesting this degeneracy?
Well, at least some are.
Very few. Not enough.
Not enough yet.
How many people live in the United Kingdom? 60-something million?
65 million
65
people.
million people? The biggest demonstration, 25,000?
25,000 just in London.
Just in London. Okay, suppose it's 100,000 nationwide. Suppose it's 200,000 nationwide. Where are the 5 million? Minimum. Because, okay, there are 7.9 million people who are at a legitimate risk of serious complications or even dying with the Wuhan flu. So we'll leave that aside. Let's say there are 8. But there's still more than 50 million people who should be protesting this. And the fact that you don't is your fault. Yeah, Boris is fucking it up, but what are you doing to unfuck this up?
Well, I'm willing to bet on the fact that as restrictions will get worse, because they will get worse, cold season is already on top of us everywhere in Europe, including the UK. And as restrictions will get tighter, I'm looking particularly at the north of England, which is prone to be more Labour-centric, to ramp up the protests.
Yeah.
They will get to 1 million by the end of this year, for sure.
Yeah, although Brits don't have a... Well, actually, we could put a rule of protests for them in the winter too. The London riots were in February, weren't they? Back in 14 or 12, I don't remember.
Yeah, 2012, yeah.
Yeah, 2000, but it was in February, wasn't it? I remember it was pretty cold outside.
Yeah.
Well, good luck with that. Axios. Top German official hushed up report on China's influence. A high-ranking German official suppressed sensitive intelligence report in 2018 on China's growing influence in Deutschland out of fear it would damage business ties with the CCP. Business interests have long shaped Germany's relationship with China to the detriment of human rights concerns and even national security. The highly sensitive report, completed in 2018, examined the Chinese government's attempt to influence every level of German government, society and business, according to 2 former US intelligence officials. What they're saying, as a matter of principle, the German government does not comment on matters concerning intelligence findings or activities of the intelligence services, a federal government told Axios. German policy toward China has traditionally been driven by economic factors. Germany depends on exports to a high degree, and that gives business a large influence. Business representatives talk to the government and are used to being listened to, says Volker Stanzel, a former German ambassador to China. The Chinese Communist Party succeeded in globalizing its economy because it was able to join itself to foreign business interests, added Stanzel. Those business interests have tended to discourage their home governments from policies seen as harmful to economic ties with China. But Beijing has increasingly fussed trade with politics, threatening punitive economic measures against companies and governments that criticize China's human rights record, deny market access to Chinese companies like Huawei, or express support for Taiwan. German business interests, as well as the country's top economics official Peter Altmaier, have thus tended to downplay China's growing human rights violations and security challenges. Altmaier is the same guy who tries to invite China in the EU Gaia X project. The German problem again. One prominent example, German auto giant Volkswagen operates a factory in Urumqi, the regional capital of Xinjiang, where the Chinese government has a gulag, basically. Okay, the result? There has been a lot of self-censorship in Germany with regard to China, said Noah Barkin, an expert in Europe-China relations at the Rhodium Group. Merkel's approach has been to criticize China behind closed doors rather than in public. But things are starting to change in Germany and around Europe amid growing global scrutiny over China's economic practices and human rights abuses. On a recent 5-nation tour of Europe, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi was assailed with pointed questions about China's crackdown in Hong Kong, its mass internment camps, and concerns about Chinese telecom giant Huawei. Merkel's trade-first approach to China is meeting resistance, and she may well be replaced next year by a more hawkish chancellor. Inshallah, that would, inshallah, that would be great.
Oh, that would be glorious, seeing Merkel finally kicked off the chancellor's seat.
Well, she will, of course. But, I mean, she announced this last year that this will be her final term. The Queen Merkel is withdrawing. But the fact that whether she'll be replaced or not is of less relevance. If she will be replaced by a more hawkish chancellor, now that would be the inshallah part, because it's been a while since Germany, or at least the Federal Republic, West Germany, has had a hawkish chancellor. I'm having trouble remembering when this was the last time. I think it was Adenauer who was the
Adenauer was the last one, because Brandt definitely wasn't, and anyone else that came after him definitely not that dude that now is at Rosneft or Gazprom.
Oh yeah, Schroeder.
Schroeder, that was his name.
Well, again, in Russian and now increasingly in the German language as well. If you want to talk about corruption of an institution,
Schröderization.
Yes,
you talk about Schröderization.
Yes. So there's that. I mean, that guy is so prominent that he became a noun. Kind of like Anthony Bork, who's got borked. But yes, the thing is that I don't believe in German Reformation. I really don't.
Me neither.
I'm not optimistic at all. I think the next chancellor will not be more hawkish. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I will be proven wrong, but I don't think so. And the reason I don't think so is because CDU, of course, will be suffering quite a lot of erosion due to the way they managed the cough, and they were already on a trend towards erosion because CDU has been terrible over the last 5 or 6 years. Their governance has been terrible. Unlike Monsieur Macron, Queen Merkel, Mutti Merkel didn't switch her position on diversity, progress, and vibrant communities, and those concerns haven't subsided in Germany. By the way, they haven't. Just because you don't read about them on Deutsche Welle lately, that doesn't mean they cease to exist. No, they didn't. And nowadays, you have an increasing coalition in Germany, which is no longer populated just by the so-called far right and the legitimate far left, called Die Linke, but now you have a lot of people in the middle as well who are willing to join multi-party coalition. There's like we just hate Merkel and CDU, like for real, flattening the CDU coalition. And as a result, I think it's going to be an even more what's the term, hung parliament. The Bundestag is not going to be such an easy place to build a grand coalition coming the next federal elections. And of course, the only way they can avoid that is by simply making more diktats, like Merkel tried to do in Thuringen, where they basically canceled the results of the elections because a legit libertarian, a legit right-winger ended up being premier. Eventually another libertarian ended up being, again, at the federal level, Germany is not a democracy and hasn't been a democracy for quite some time now. Because when you have, imagine in the UK having a government formed by Labour and Tory for 15 years. That's basically Germany for you, and everyone else be like, really? So yeah. On the other hand, of course, when it comes to the Germany suppressing intelligence reports, that's not a surprise. If we remember, document 93, document 93, published, leaked to the press in April, which basically said that the cough is a false alarm, and that everything the state did is wrong, and the state in itself produced fake news, whether intentionally or not, but it was fake news. And for 3 weeks the chancellor pretended that the document doesn't exist. Then when it was impossible to deny that it exists, they were like, yes, it exists, but the individual who wrote it is not part of the intelligence personnel and was acting in his own personal interest, when that was impossible to prove because it was wrong. It was an official report by the Ministry of Internal Affairs and by the
by the BND.
BND, yes.
Yep.
Then they basically tried to kick out that guy from the intelligence community. That didn't particularly work out that well, thank goodness for the German bureaucracies. So yeah, I mean, Germany suppressing the truth.
Shocking.
Okay, yeah, it's another day ending in Y. Alrighty, well, why did you put this one into the CAC24? That would be DG24. We call them CAC24. A huge project announced by the Americans, a highway and a rail line that will connect Constanța to Gdansk in Poland. A huge infrastructure project could be born soon in Romania, a highway and a rail line that will connect Constanța to Gdansk in Poland. It's a project that would be done with American help, a huge investment according to US Ambassador in Bucharest, Adrian Zuckerman. We will begin a new project along with Poland for construction of a highway and a rail line to connect the Black Sea with Gdansk at the Baltic Sea. The infrastructure project could prove to be of huge benefit for the economies of Romania and Poland, but also for regional economies years from now on, Zuckerman declared last Friday at Washington, D.C. at a conference held along with the signing of the Intergovernmental Accord between Romania and the United States, which went on at the Department of Energy. Alongside with Poland, Romania represents essential allies in defending the eastern flank against Russian aggression. Ambassador Zuckerman highlighted. The Minister of Economy from Romania, Virgil Popescu, has traveled to Washington and signed the accord on behalf of Romania. He has confirmed for CAC24 the existence of a huge infrastructure project, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, why did you put this one into the show? This is like really old news. It is.
Well, yes. So this project has existed for at least
2 years.
Not 2 years, more like 12 years.
In 2018, it was confirmed at the Three Seas Initiative Summit in Bucharest, and then in 2019 at the Ljubljana Summit, it was also not just confirmed, but in Ljubljana, I think it was Mike Pompeo who basically said, yes, October 2020, the first round of shekels for that project, Via Carpatia, is happening, period.
Yes, but Via Carpatia has been a plan as early as 2008, based on what I found in reports.
Sure.
But there was also an article, which I hope you'll put it in, that the accord that the Romanian minister signed.
Yeah, also includes
it was an $8 billion investment into nuclear energy, particularly because
I didn't put that one, but I'll leave it in the low bar.
You'll find it in the low bar. So the Americans will sponsor with $8 billion the project to build 2 more nuclear reactors at Chernavoda, which will guarantee at least more independence in terms of energy policy in Eastern Europe. And that's important because there's been a dependence just as well, even though Romania does have still a significant industry in hydrocarbons, particularly natural gas, not so much oil as it used to be in the past. But even then, in the last so-far report that we've done, we've talked about how a £15 billion project got cancelled in Wales for a nuclear power plant. This is a tiny step towards pushing for nuclear, which is a good idea because renewables are cancer, in the literal sense and in
But hold on a second, isn't Trump pro-Russia? So why is his administration pushing for these kinds of infrastructure projects connecting the south of the Intermarium with the north of the Intermarium, and further advancing the energy independence of the eastern flank of the alliance from Russia? I thought Trump is Russia's man. I thought Trump is Putin's friend. Oh no! Hold on a second. That was
that's literal fake news.
No. Sorry, that's Biden's aide to the energy who pushed for the Kremlin's agenda, nuclear agenda, between 2014 and late 2016, and was Biden's advisor for the energy policy. Sorry, I mixed up the two. Yeah, so that. Nah. But I'm serious. Wasn't Trump the pro-Russia guy? Because that's what I've been reading on CNN. But it has to be true, right?
I read it on CNN, so it must be true.
So it must be true, of course.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, this particular piece of news with Via Carpatia is not exactly news. Again, this
it's not exactly news, but geopolitically it is pretty important because yes,
I'm sure there are a few headaches at Kremlin.
Well, definitely, particularly because yes, infrastructure is a big issue between, in not just Constanța, the port itself, but also the connection to even within Romania. Not to mention going all the way to the Baltic Sea to Gdansk, and in terms of infrastructure, when in the unlikely but not impossible circumstance that a war of aggression may break out, having to move logistics around is actually a pretty important thing, because let's remember, during World War II, the reason why the Germans pushed so far up until they got boggled down in Russia was because they had the logistics on point. And even I don't exactly remember, there was a US general that said that great generals win the war on logistics. Yeah, that's pretty true, and that's what's being targeted to be accomplished with Via Carpatia in order to finally get that project moving.
Yes, because for instance, now if you want to move 100 tanks from, I don't know, next to Brest, but on the Polish side of the border, and if you want to move them to Kogalniceanu, which is next to Constanța, which is a NATO airbase, if you want to do that now, it can take 6 days, 5 days, something to that effect, and you have to change through different standards because Hungary is not particularly well connected either, at least when it comes to heavy traffic like this. And then, because of course you're going to have to do it via railway. You're not going to do it.
You can't do it via the road.
And it's taking a lot. And during an event, a hypothetical war scenario, 5 days is quite a lot.
Well, 5 days could mean you losing quite a lot of land.
Yeah, it could mean you losing the war.
Particularly in asymmetric warfare that is happening since first Desert Storm.
Yes, and if there is ever going to be any kind of aggression, it's probably going to be on the asymmetric scenario. Nobody's going to do World War II again because it's just too bloody costly. But asymmetric warfare, some shenanigans here and there, some what's the word I'm looking for? Some kerfuffles here and there. Yeah, that's possible. And if you have the logistics right, then there's very little thing to be afraid of.
Yeah, and logistics will also be strengthened, particularly on the Ukrainian side, because let's not forget, Ukraine is still in a war scenario. A quarter of Ukraine is still under Russian control. Well, is it a quarter or a fifth?
Less than a fifth. By land mass, still. By population is even less than that. But
still, you've been to Ukraine. You know how terrible. Okay, the rail infrastructure is still pretty decent, although
and it's getting better.
Although they run on the Russian gauge, not on the standard European gauge.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, that they're getting better at that too.
They're getting better, but still the roads are pretty fucking terrible, particularly in Western Ukraine.
Not as terrible as they used to be. I mean, when was the last time you've been to Ukraine? It must have been 5 or 6 years ago, probably.
Actually, I've never been to the Ukraine, but I got contacts that went in Ukraine by road, and they told me, yeah, it is pretty terrible.
For instance, first time I had to take a long trip by road, I thought that I wouldn't make it out alive by the end of the trip. It was a trip, well, by Ukraine standards, it was a pretty short trip, from Chernivtsi all the way to Kiev.
So
but
what was that, like 500 kilometers?
Something like that, yeah. But by the time I had to do that again, the road had improved quite a lot, and it was also wider. Sure, not perfect, but definitely I could afford to take a bet that I might make it out alive. But yeah, when it comes to the railway infrastructure, they've also started doubling it. So now
so now you can run both standard gauge and wide gauge. Yeah, that is actually pretty important.
Yes, and the speed of the trains have increased quite a lot, both for merch and for
speed on the Romanian side has to be improved. I don't know about Poland, but even they could do some improvements.
Yeah, with Poland, on the passenger side is not particularly different from Romania. The problem in Poland is for the speed for the merch, which is much lower than Romania, and that should be improved. Last time I was in Poland, which was I think August last year, the PKP, which is their state company, had just gotten a few 100 million zloty for this purpose, and some of the tracks were already closed for passengers in order to go through rehabilitation. And then I was looking on the map which ones are closed, and it's probably on the Via Carpatia route. So things are moving. Since many of you all kept asking, why do you insist on going to the Three Seas Initiative summits? That's why. That's why. By the way, this year they held it on Zoom. Well, not on Zoom, but they held it online, and it was, as you expected, weak as fuck. Because again, these kinds of summits,
you don't hold them online.
It's not the meetings on the stage that the press is invited to videotape and whatnot. No. It's all of the conversations that happen before and after people go on the stage. And by people, I mean state leaders, prime ministers,
and particularly people that don't end up on the stage, who represent different interests.
Yes.
The different interests worth billions.
Yeah, and what's nice about these kinds of summits, and that's why I love going to them, and I'll insist on going on as many of them as possible for as long as I'm alive, is that no participant is horrified by the press. For the most part, they don't even care, because that the press is there, and 99.9% of the surface is fully accessible to anyone with a badge. And it's on you, the journalist. If you want, you can stick around in the press area and eat the cheap food that they give it to you and things of that nature. But if you're me, you're like, screw the press area. Let's mingle with all of the state secretaries and the leaders of industries and things of that nature and see what they're talking about. And oftentimes you get to learn breaking news that 2 years later they're on the front page of the newspaper. They're like, oh, piece of news, and I'm like, oh, I gave that on the couch 3 years ago. So there's that. Moving a little bit further to the west, BBC France, teacher attack, rallies held to honor beheaded Samuel Paty. Thousands have attended rallies across France in honor of Samuel Paty, the teacher beheaded after showing cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad to his pupils. People in the Place de la République in Paris carried the slogan Je suis enseignant, with Prime Minister Jean Castex saying we are France. A man named as Abdullah A was shot dead by police on Friday after killing Mr. Paty close to his school near Paris. An 11th person has now been arrested as part of the investigation. No details have been given about the arrest. 4 close relatives of the suspect were detained shortly after the killing. 6 more people were held on Saturday, including the father of a pupil at the school and the preacher described by French media as a radical Islamist. President Emmanuel Macron said the attack bore all of the hallmarks of an Islamist terrorist attack, and the teacher had been murdered because he taught not freedom of expression. The murder comes as a trial over the 2015 attack on Charlie Hebdo, the satirical magazine that published cartoons of Prophet Muhammad. The trial is still underway. The Place de la République in Paris, filled with people rallying in support of Mr. Patty 47, Mr. Caste and the Paris mayor Anne Hidalgo joined them. The square was the scene of a huge demonstration in which 1.5 million people showed solidarity with Charlie Hebdo following the deadly attack in January 15. One protester on Sunday carried a sign reading "Zero tolerance to all enemies of the Republic." Another one said, "I am a professor, I'm thinking of you, Samuel." Yes, if I want to make a macabre joke, I'm saying that the teacher should have been fined for not wearing his mask. But on a more serious note, notice that there is no China virus at these protests, because Emmanuel Macron said it's okay, and therefore the China virus is suspended, so you can hold rallies in support of the new policies of King Macron. Now, it just so happens that even I agree with the new policies of Emmanuel Macron, which is further crack down on Islamists. Yeah, that's always welcomed. I don't care what the reasons behind it. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, it's fascinating how the Overton window moved from 6 years ago.
Just 5 years ago, we're far right.
When being against Islam, and particularly Salafist Islam, that's pretty epidemic in Western Europe, particularly Germany and France.
Particularly
France. We were called the far-right Islamophobes, and now
far-right Nazis, and
yes.
And all of the rest of the nomenclature of
it's fascinating how the Overton window moved.
Yeah, it just so happens that if you practice your propaganda right, eventually you win. But yeah, what's more interesting is that this is not exactly, the press presents it as a breakthrough, but it really isn't. The Macron administration has started taking Islamism a little bit more seriously since at least October 2019. Up until October 2019, it was all exactly as you said, far right and whatever. But since October 19, they started taking it a little bit more serious, and this appears to have been. We'll see if this lasts. Maybe this is the case, and I hope it is, but maybe it isn't. We'll see if it lasts. But this appears to have been a triggering moment that basically Macron said, fuck it, I'm not gonna do it gradually, let's go all in, and just fuck these people.
We're gonna enter with a steamroller.
yes, let's get in with the steamroller and flatten the Islamists, which is fine.
Yeah, it's fine, but at least know the context of why he's doing that. It's that he's been gradually losing ground against Marine Le Pen,
yes,
who has maintained ever since 2012.
Yes,
yeah, back when Hollande was still not even Hollande, the one before him.
No, but in the case of Marine Le Pen, yes,
yeah.
François Hollande was still president, and she was maintaining that Islamists should be flattened.
Exactly. So he's doing one of the biggest motivations on why he's doing this is because he's losing ground on that front against Front National.
Now called, I think, La Rassemblement National. Yeah, the more interesting part, which probably shows a little bit of a shift in the Overton window, because again, whilst nobody in public dared to seriously condemn Charlie Hebdo themselves for those caricatures, there were quite a few in the French intelligentsia and intellectuals and whatnot were saying, yeah, but maybe they went a bit too far and whatnot. Last night, they projected a huge Muhammad caricature. I'm going to put the picture and the link to read about it. Breitbart wrote a nice article about it. That was unexpected, and that was something that would not have happened a year ago, for sure.
Definitely.
For sure. So whether Macron's shift towards let's start getting rid of some Islamists to full let's flatten them all, whether that shift is genuine or not, whether it will last or not, in the culture, the Overton window is not permanently shift for sure, because nothing is permanent, but it's definitely decisively shifted in a way that was not thinkable a year and a half ago, let alone 5 years ago, let alone 8 years ago. And as we all know, politics is downstream from culture. So if Macron isn't fulfilling the duty to flatten the Islamists with the steamroller, the next president will. So, I'm just saying. But I still have to note this particular aspect. There seems to be no China virus at these particular demonstrations, right? Where are all the panic cards claiming that you're killing more people for the demonstrations? If you want to honor Professor Samuel Paty, maybe you should be staying at home. And where are you? Where are you all? Did the cat eat your tongue, or maybe they're all Islamists and they're keeping a low profile?
Closeted Islamists.
And I'm serious with the closeted Islamists point, because there are a few in the French intelligentsia, in the French intellectual class, if you want, so-called intellectual class, because most of them are dumb as fuck, who could legitimately be called closeted Islamists. People who have been publicly defending the extreme actions of Islamists on secular grounds, essentially, right?
Not only back when Je suis Charlie was trending, but also few years back when the two guys shot up Bataclan. They tried to avoid the Islam question so hard it was borderline pathetic.
Yes.
To ignore that giant elephant in the room.
Well, the same happened now. I mean, the New York Times, they were like, police shot a man after a knife attack or something like that. That was the headline for the New York Times for this particular piece of news.
But we don't have much expectation from the New York Times.
Yeah, and you click on the article, and that's what I do usually. Click on the article, Control F, Islam.
Zero entries.
Zero entries. And I'm like, guys, come on. I mean, really, come on. So religion of special needs. Good luck, Mr. Macron, because otherwise you won't be president. That's basically what it is. Associated Press, over 50,000 march in Belarus against authoritarian leader. Tens of thousands of people marched through the streets of Belarus capital on Sunday, demanding the ouster of the country's authoritarian leader, who won his sixth term in office in an election widely seen as rigged. That's an understatement. More than 50,000 people took place in the rally in Minsk, according to the Vyasna Human Rights Center. Demonstrators carried banners mocking Alexander Lukashenko, who has run the country for 26 years, and they chanted "Go away." Actually, they chanted "Fuck off." But mass protests have rocketed Belarus since August the 9th presidential election that handed Lukashenko another victory with 80% of the vote. His main challenger, Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya, got 10%. She and her supporters refused to recognize the results, saying the outcome of the vote was obviously manipulated. The authorities tried to quell the unrest with mass detentions and police dispersing crowds with truncheons, stun grenades and water cannons. On Monday, the country's interior ministry threatened to use firearms against the protesters if need be, saying that the rallies have become organized and extremely radical. However, the protests have continued despite the crackdown. This is the first march since the authorities threatened to use firearms, but even that didn't stop the protests, which transforms into different forms but doesn't die down, Vyasna leader Ales Bialyatsky said. Tsikhanouskaya, who is currently in exile in Lithuania after leaving the country in fear for her safety, threatened on Tuesday to call a nationwide strike unless Lukashenko announces his resignation, releases political prisoners and stops the crackdown on protesters. If our demands aren't fulfilled by October the 25th, the entire country will peacefully take it to the streets, Tsikhanouskaya said in the statement. On the 26th, a national strike of all enterprises will begin, all roads will be blocked, sales in state-owned stores will collapse. Protesters on Sunday marched down on one of Minsk's main avenues, where plants and factories are located, and chanted the strike, and the workers are with the people. The city center was blocked off by water cannons and armored vehicles, and dozens of military trucks were seen driving around the streets. Several subway stations were closed and mobile internet wasn't working in the area of the march. Lukashenko understands that if there hadn't been all these artificial obstacles, the entire Minsk would have come out to the rally, said Valery Karbalevich, an independent political analyst in Minsk. Despite the threats of using firearms and intimidation, the KGB, by the KGB, people take it to the streets. It's legit called the KGB. People take to the streets. The protests are not winding down, and it shows that the political crisis in Belarus Belarus is in full swing, Karbalevich added. In a statement on Sunday, Tsikhanouskaya encouraged Belarusians to continue peaceful protests. Let's continue to express our demands peacefully and persistently. It is yielding results, she said, adding that the authorities have released Ilya Saley, the lawyer of Tsikhanouskaya's top associate Maria Kolesnikova, from detention. Kolesnikova was jailed last month on charges of undermining the state security. I would have heard that before. That could bring a 5-year prison term if she's convicted. Saley was detained in September as well in relation to the same charge. Aside from Minsk, the protests on Sunday took place in several big cities, including Brest, Grodno, Gamil, and Vitebsk. Scores of demonstrators have been detained across the country. The list of detained protesters released by the Vyazna Center on Sunday evening had over 150 names on it.
Does this not look like December 1989 all over again?
Yeah, it's sort of, not really. It's lasting a lot longer.
Yeah, it's been lasting a lot longer, but threatening to use firearms against the protesters, well, that could go horribly wrong.
Yeah, but Ceausescu didn't threaten, he just used them.
Yeah, he just used them, yeah.
Yes.
At least these people have warnings, so they'll be prepared in case shit is the fan.
That's precisely why I don't think they will be they'll be using them. Again, if Lukashenko wanted to mow them down with a machine gun, would have done it a month ago. I don't think he will be using them. And the reason I don't think he'll be using them is because Lukashenko is not in a particularly great position himself personally. I don't mean politically. Politically, it's a separate story. But himself personally, because where would you go? He's not in great relationship with Russia either.
He's gonna go to if he uses firearms, he's gonna go to the Belarusian version of Turgoviste.
Yes, I mean, he's pretty old. He might want to have some nice pension, nice retirement. I'm just saying, unlike Ceausescu, didn't get that going for him. Good. Too bad that we didn't. Anyway, what I'm saying is that the reason I don't think this is necessarily orchestrated, at least not entirely orchestrated, is because it's lasting so long. I mean, if this had been a coup or anything that had any sort of external organization on it, it would have been done already. I mean, it's been 4 months and a half since they've been protesting, and usually these kinds of things take 3 months, 2 months and a half, when they have external support. These people don't. They really don't. I mean, what's the external support that the protesters really got? Telegram Incorporated created a new protocol just for them so they can avoid Lukashenko's censorship. Lithuania allowed Svetlana to go to Vilnius to avoid being, suicided by by Lukashenko's regime. And that would be pretty much it, because the European Union, for most of its posturing of we're gonna issue sanctions because we're with the people, so and shit. Nothing happened. Of course, nothing happened. Color me shocked. The United States is busy with its own election campaign right now, so if there's going to be any action by the United States, it's going to be after November the 4th. Doesn't matter who wins. If there is going to be any action, I don't think it will.
I don't think it will be.
Belarus is not particularly important, and it should be more important for Europe, for Western Europe, whatever, European Union, nominally non-commie Europe. Okay, but other than Poland and Lithuania, which are immediate neighbors, nobody else seems to be really caring that much. I mean, okay, maybe you can count Romania there as well. We paid for some of their activism and whatever, but that's nowhere near enough. Now, of course, the question is, should the neighboring countries care more?
Well, it depends on which neighboring countries we're talking about. If Russia cares,
no, I'm talking about the Western ones. Ukraine, Poland, Lithuania, Germany. Should the Western neighbors?
They won't care, but it remains to be seen. So they said October the 25th. So we're gonna see.
That's 2 days from now.
Yeah.
3 days from now, because they say the 26th they would trigger the national strike.
Yeah, it remains to be seen past that point what's gonna happen. It's gonna be very interesting.
First of all, can they mobilize for a national strike the way Svetlana is describing it? Because if they can do that,
well, you're probably more informed of how much did the election results pissed off the population as a whole. Because if they pissed off a great majority, then she does have the push required to go nationwide.
What I'm saying is that at least after the election, August the 10th, August the 11th, the first few days after the election, when of course it was pretty obvious that Lukashenko meddled with the votes quite a little bit, that in itself didn't piss off that many people. Maybe it pissed a third of the population. Maybe. However, since then, a lot of very messed up things happened. And the choir of the pissed off population has increased rather than decreased. Because at this point, it's not even about the election anymore.
No,
I mean, some of the people that keep me informed with samizdat videos and things of that nature, the way you do it when you undermine a totalitarian regime. One of my, actually a very close friend, because he's been informing me about these things for many years now, he was telling me that at this point nobody even cares about the election. At this point it's like, can you just fuck off already? That's basically the attitude. And since it's no longer just about the election, it's very hard to say. We can obviously observe it by the size of the rallies that it is bigger than the election. But how much bigger? That I don't know, and nobody can know. That's why I'm saying that if Svetlana manages to push a national strike and actually gets to mobilize enough people to make that happening, then Mr. Lukashenko should start writing 3 letters. But if that doesn't happen, and if the strike ends up being, pretty pathetic and weak and fizzles out, then maybe it's still not, you don't have enough momentum. I don't know. I hope Svetlana knows what she's doing, because this is a one shot. You usually threaten with these kinds of things if you can do it, and you'd better have a good assessment over your own troops, so to speak, to threaten with these kinds of things and be able to deliver.
Have we explained on the World Sofa report what the 3 letters mean?
I don't know.
I don't think we did it.
No,
as far as I remember.
Right, it's a commie era joke, adapted all over time with every leader. The most recent iteration of it, of course, being with Ceausescu. Basically, when Ceausescu came to power in 1965, he was given 3 letters, and they were wrapped in a package, and on the package it was written by Gheorghe Udej, which is the previous communist president, head of state, whatever, saying that if you have troubles, open 1 letter. And in 1967, there is that famous episode when the Soviet Union wants to invade Czechoslovakia, and Ceausescu be like, okay, this is a very complicated issue. That's kind of counts out as trouble, right? And opens the first letter. The letter said, call the military and blame me. And that's exactly what he does. He calls the military and says the military will not join the Soviet Union. We're not going to follow the failed policies of my predecessor, who licked the boot of the Soviet Union a bit too much and whatnot, right? And everything goes great. Ceausescu's image gets improved internationally as, a less hardline leader than the typical Soviet style, yada yada. Okay. March 4th, 1977. A big earthquake hits Romania, and particularly the southeast of the country gets hit really, really hard, and some of the smaller towns get flattened physically. The capital city, Bucharest, portions of it get flattened by the earthquake. It was a very strong earthquake, 7.3.
7.8.
Or 7.8 on the Richter square, yes, a very, very big earthquake. And of course, the capital in shambles, and with all of the troubles in the country, and many things stopped working, and of course it was terrible. Ceausescu got scared. He was like, okay, and he opens the second letter, which says, call the military and blame me. And that's exactly what he does. He calls in the military to help with rebuilding the country, and says that most of the damage done by the earthquake is because his predecessor, Gheorghe Udej, had terrible construction codes, and he built terribly, and now we're gonna build better because in our effort to build the multilaterally socialist society, multilaterally developed socialist society, right? Everything goes great. The reconstruction plan works impeccably. Everyone is convinced that Gheorghiu just didn't build well, and that's why the earthquake hit harder than it should have hit. All is great. December 21st, 1989. Already protests in Timișoara and now in the capital city, also in Sibiu and other cities, open contestation or open dismissal of communism in the streets in every big city of the country. Ceausescu, again a bit worried, opens up the third letter, which said, "It's time for you to write 3 letters." Right.
Wow.
So that's basically what I'm saying with Mr. Lukashenko. If that particular national strike threatened by Svetlana works, and her threat can be materialized, at least in part, the way she described it, then it's time for Mr. Lukashenko to start writing 3 letters. If not, then it's time for him to call the military and blame the predecessor. I'm just saying. I know it sounds cynical, but I'm usually right with these kinds of things. Undermining these kinds of regimes tends to be kind of my specialty. Okay. Catholic News Agency. Pope Francis calls for civil union law for same-sex couples in shift from Vatican stance. In a documentary that premiered Wednesday in Rome, Pope Francis called for the passage of civil union laws for same-sex couples, departing from the position of the Vatican's doctrinal office and the Pope's predecessors on the issue. The remarks came amid a portion of the documentary that reflected on pastoral care for those who identify as LGBT. Homosexuals have a right to be a part of the family. They're children of God and have a right to a family. Nobody should be thrown out or be made miserable because of it, Pope Francis said in the film of his approach to pastoral care. After these remarks and in comments likely to spark controversy among Catholics, Pope Francis weighed in directly on the issue of civil unions for same-sex couples. What we have to create is a civil union law. That way they are legally covered, the Pope said. I stood up for that. The remarks come in Francesco, a documentary on the life and ministry of Pope Francis, which premiered on October the 21st as part of the Rome Film Festival and is set to make its North America premiere on Sunday. The film chronicles the approach of Pope Francis to pressing social issues and to pastoral ministry among those who live, in the words of the Pontiff, on the existential peripheries. Featuring interviews with Vatican figures including Cardinal Luis Tarul and other collaborators of the Pope, Francesco looks at the Pope's advocacy for migrants and refugees, the poor, his work on the issue of clerical sexual abuse, the role of women in society, and the disposition of Catholics and others towards those who identify as LGBT. The film addresses the pastoral outreach of Pope Francis to those including a story of the Pontiff encouraging 2 Italian men in a same-sex relationship to raise their children in their parish church, which one of the men said was greatly beneficial to his children. He didn't mention that was his opinion on my family. What was his opinion on my family? Perhaps he's following the doctrine on this point, while praising the Pope for a disposition and attitude of welcome and encouragement. The Pope's remarks on civil unions come amid that part of the documentary. Filmmaker Evgeny Afinievsky told CNA that the Pope made his call for civil unions during an interview with the documentarian conducted with the Pope. The Pope's direct call represents a shift from the perspective of his predecessors and from his own more circumspect positions in the past. In 2010, while he was Archbishop of Buenos Aires, Pope Francis opposed efforts to legalize same-sex marriage, while Sergio Rubin, the future Pope's biographer, suggested that Francis supported the idea of civil unions as a way to prevent the wholesale adoption of same-sex marriage in Argentina. Miguel Voites, director of the Argentinian Catholic news outlet AICA, dismissed in 2013 that claim as false. But the Pope's mention of having previously stood up for civil unions seems to confirm the report of Rubin and others who said that the then Cardinal Bergoglio supported privately the idea as a compromise. While bishops in some countries have not opposed same-sex civil union proposals and tried instead to distinguish them from civil marriage, opponents of civil unions have long warned that they serve as a legislative and cultural bridge to same-sex marriage initiatives, give tacit approval to immorality, and fail to protect the rights of children to be parented by a mother and a father.
Afinevsky told the EWTN News this month that he tried in the documentary to present the Pope as he saw him and that the film might not please all Catholics. He told CNN Wednesday that in his view the film is not about the Pope's call for civil unions but about many other global issues. I'm looking at him as not as the Pope, I'm looking at him as a humble human being, great role model for younger generation, leader for the older generation, a leader to many people, not in the sense of the Catholic Church, but in the sense of pure leadership on the ground and on the streets, Afinevsky added. The documentarian said he began working in 2018, blah, 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 blah. Afinevsky, a Russian-born filmmaker living in the US, was in 2015 nominated for both an Academy Award and an Emmy Award for his work Winter on Fire, a documentary that chronicled Ukraine 2013 and 2014 Euromaidan protests. So basically this is Russian disinformation.
And very spicy Russian disinformation.
Very spicy Russian disinformation, right. Now, first of all, let's not have any doubts. Francesco Bergoglio is
anti-pope.
Yes, he's a cleric raised in the tradition of the liberation theology, which is a form of theology that is apostate and heretical and created in the propaganda laboratories of the KGB. Okay, so yes, Francis is a commie. Okay, so that's one aspect. Now, does that mean that he necessarily has to be pro-faggotry? No, but in this case, yes. I've seen that some of the Catholic apologetics were like, oh, but he didn't actually say this because he said that, you know, non-straights have a right to a family, but not necessarily to form a family, and they have to just be part of a family. So basically was opposing, you know, throwing away your kid because he's a homo or things like that. Well, no, I think he was pretty explicit about it. I really think he was pretty explicit about it. And whether I believe that or not is irrelevant. I'm not a Catholic, I'm not a man of the church, so, you know, you can just not give a shit about what I believe about this. But, you know, the bishops from the United States, they understood it the same way I did. You know, and those are very, very high men of church. And you know, those people, they understood it the same way the Sofa understood.
Yes, it will be interesting to find out the opinion of the Polish Catholics on this, since they have LGBT-free zones in the front of the country.
I haven't looked whether the bishop, the Archbishop of Poland, expressed a position yet on this or not. I don't know.
But it will piss off a lot of Catholics in Poland.
Yes,
particularly because they still adhere by what Jan Pavel II did.
Yeah, damn Poles and their intention of staying Catholic rather than go with the progress. Yeah, I'm pretty sure the average believer, the average churchgoer in Poland, looks at this and say, what the heck is this degeneracy? But whether the clergymen in Poland will be able to, or not able, willing to stand up and say, you know what, this Pope is insane, that remains to be seen.
Yeah, like the last thing the Catholic Church needed, particularly in these times, is
a schism.
Yes, is another attempt at a schism.
Oh, I don't care what they need, but no, I don't care what they want. What they need is a schism. I mean, really, you can't be part of the same church with this guy. I'm just saying, because whether you like it or not, at least in terms of what's it called? Well, in terms of propaganda, because it's a Vatican term anyway. At least in terms of propaganda, you know, for the majority of the planet, that would be what the Pope says is what Catholicism is. Now, I know, it's not exactly like that, and the Pope is not exactly infallible, and yes, things can be corrected, and yes, there are checks. I get it. But I get it, because I actually tried to understand the mechanism. Most people don't give a shit. Most people will hear or listen or read this statement and say, oh, okay, so now the Catholics are pro-faggotry. Okay. Okay, yeah, that's kind of terrible.
So what implications will that have towards combating sexual abuse? Because sexual abuse in the Catholic Church is
wholly homosexual. Wholly with WH, but also without the W. I mean, you know, now the Pope says it's without the W.
Yeah, so that's the last thing that needed, but it will definitely piss off a lot of conservative Catholics, not the US but Poland and also Africa, and Africa is a huge continent.
I'm a big fan. There is an African cardinal who's been on the anti-Francis front for quite some time now. I keep forgetting his name because I don't follow church news that much, but I'll remember his name and I'll just write it down on the screen. That guy, I'm a big fan of that guy becoming the Pope. If you are to be progressive, we need an African Pope, but that guy, necessarily that guy, that guy would make the church great again, for sure. and that guy has a lot more, has a very similar biography with Francis, except for the liberation theology part. Other than that, he has a very similar biography with Francis. He's been involved in a lot of missionary work with the poor, helped a lot of very poor communities. I would argue a little bit more than Francis because, his side of the earth was a little bit poorer than Argentina. I want that guy to be a pope because that guy has a very similar, has the kind of discourse on these matters that I consider to be rightful and proper and moral. While he stops short of the idea of helicoptering communists, I'm pretty sure he doesn't disagree in principle with the idea. The thing is that whilst I understand these kinds of finesse details, I don't think most people do, and I don't think most people care. Most people will see this statement and say, okay, this is enough. I'm hearing some rumors, and please feel free to try to disprove it, because I don't know for sure, but I'm hearing some rumors. Sources close to the matter have issued a statement to the sofa that in various areas of the United States and South America and certain Western European countries, could be Finland, could be France, could be Italy, are slowly looking towards orthodoxy as a solution to this issue. And by Orthodox, I mean Orthodox Christianity. And not just Catholics, some Protestants as well, especially the Protestants or the Neo-Protestants in the same church as Hillary Clinton, and all of those kinds of, or the Unitarian Church, which actually had its own schism because the African bishops were like, we're a church, not a book club. Whereas the North American bishops were like, yeah, let's be a book club because, it's diverse and fun. And I'm hearing that this is, whilst it's not a spectacular phenomenon, it's a consistent phenomenon that has been going on for 6 or 7 years now, and it's slowly growing. And if you add up the numbers over the last 7 years, it's actually quite a huge number of people who just either leave the church and don't join any other, or they join Orthodoxy. I don't know if it's true or not, or I know it's true, but I don't know the extent to which it's true. It could be 100,000 people, which is irrelevant, or it could be 150 million people, which is quite relevant. I don't know the extent. But what I'm saying is that these kinds of statements don't help.
Oh, no, not that they don't help, but you also got to look at this from the historical perspective of the Catholic Church, particularly the Vatican. Such an event is unprecedented by considering the historical record. Not even Pope Pius, I don't remember his number, that aided the Nazis.
Yes,
was that damaging to the image of the church, and something that could come even close could be the Borgia Pope that had that had wives and illegitimate children, but even that the degeneracy was at least contained within the Vatican.
Yes.
So this will actually, I'm pretty sure that it will have a lot of significant repercussions at the level of the Catholic Church as a whole.
The only comparable precedent is Vatican II. The Vatican II conference, which shifted doctrine quite a lot, and as a result of it, things have been going in the wrong direction, slowly but consistently. Now, admittedly, for a while this was all contained because where there were 2 consecutive popes that were incredibly exceptional as humans, right? That would be John Paul II and Benedict XVI, otherwise known as Ratzinger. So these two were exceptional men. But as a rule, popes tend to be more like Francis, The thing is that Francis comes in a period after Vatican II, which means he gets a lot more leeway with these kinds of things. Whereas in the past, when you would get such a messed up individual as a pope, there were more constraints and less leeway. And also there were some other methods too. I mean, we all remember John Paul II, but very few people remember John Paul I. John Paul I was one of the shortest.
He had like a
30 days, 20-something days.
I remember it was something around 72, actually.
Anyway, very short.
Yeah, very short, several months.
Yes.
For sure.
And the reason his rule was short is because he was poisoned. And he was poisoned because he was a liberal.
Yep.
I mean, Francis is a conservative by comparison to John Paul I. Let me put it this way, right? So, I'm just saying, man.
If
I'm just saying, man.
We're just going to say it right now. Pope Francis did not kill himself.
I'm just saying. I've seen some reactions. You mentioned African bishops. I've seen some reaction. I think it was a bishop from Uganda who wrote an article about this particular statement and this particular kind of activism from Francis, and he doesn't even call him Pope Francis. He's call him Mr. Bergoglio, which within Catholic circles,
that's pretty significant.
That's pretty significant. I mean, it would be the equivalent of me starting cursing for 5 minutes without stopping and without repeating myself, right? So that's the equivalent when within Catholic circles, as a high-ranking cleric, you call him Mr. Bergoglio, So maybe those internal checks and balances would be enough. Quite frankly, I don't think so. I really don't think so. Or if they will prove themselves to be enough, they won't be enough for the next liberal pope. So, you need some great men in the leadership and a great man to replace this dude and purge the degeneracy within the church. You have to do it. You have to do it. Or get a schism. Not my problem. But it's going to be terrible if it's going to be a schism, and it's going to be terrible for everyone that is not Catholic, not just for Catholics.
Yes, particularly because it will create a vacuum within global religion, and that vacuum will be occupied by the religion of special needs, unfortunately.
Well, that would be the least terrible scenario. I'm serious about this. Usually this kind of vacuum is filled by the secular religions, like Marxism.
It's either that or the other, but neither are.
I'll take Dervish Islam over Marxism every day. Dervish Islam every day. Dervish Islam is like Albania. I'll take that.
Yeah, but it won't be Dervish Islam because Dervish Islam does not have the financing that Salafist Islam does.
Well, that's true.
The financing died down, particularly because Saudi Arabia got out of it. Mostly, but there's still Qatar that shovels hundreds of millions of dollars around the globe.
They're increasingly less able to do so, not because they ran out of money, but it's harder to push the money where you want, because sanctions tend to work slowly, but they tend to work. And at least in France, if Macron gets the flattening of the Salafists, because really it's the Salafists that is the problem. If Macron manages at least in part to do any flattening, they could revive the tradition created in France by my uncle Michel Vulsan, and get Dervish Islam great again to replace the vacuum left by a schismatic Catholic Church. And in France that's a big problem. A schismatic Catholic Church, that's going to be a huge problem in France in particular. Of course in Italy as well, but in France in particular. In Poland it would be easy. They would just all join the conservative schismatic faction, and nobody would notice. But in more ideologically diverse religious circles like the French ones or the Italian ones, that's gonna be quite an issue, right? Let's go further far east, Asia news.au. South China Sea, Beijing doubles down after US sails through waters. Beijing is doubling down on its assertion of total control over the South China Sea, swarming warships and aircraft around the US destroyer as it sailed through international waters at the weekend. We urge the US side to immediately stop such kind of provocative actions, strictly manage and control its maritime and air military operations so as to not cause any eventuality, warns a Chinese military spokesman. The guided missile destroyer John S. McCain crossed through the South China Sea, passing near the disputed Parcel Islands on Friday. It's the third such mission since June. The warship's presence is part of Washington's ongoing freedom of navigation campaign to assert what it calls common practice. The post-World War II law of the sea determines the South China Sea and Taiwan Strait to be international waters. This permits the unrestricted movements of any commercial, private or national vessels. Beijing, despite being a signatory to the international law of sea, is ignoring this. Chinese People's Liberation Army Colonel Zhang Nandong told the Communist Party-controlled Xinhua, a news agency, that Beijing demanded the US end such blatant navigation hegemony and military provocation that seriously violated China's sovereignty and security interests and gravely jeopardized peace and stability in the South China Sea. In July, Beijing accused the United States of sailing through the world like a bully after the aircraft carriers USS Nimitz and USS Ronald Reagan exercised in the region. Now Zhang has accused Washington of sending its warship to show off its forces, severely infringe upon China's sovereignty and security interests. You need a missile, mate. He warned of tougher measures to come, stating Beijing would take all necessary measures to safeguard its national security. Oh, you're gonna send a strong worded letter, right? Since taking control of the Chinese Communist Party, Chairman Xi Jinping has doubled down on expansionist territorial claims, ranging from the Himalayas in the east to the South and the East China Seas in the west. With the international diplomatic and economic crisis surrounding the cough pandemic, those disputes have further escalated this year. China has dramatically expanded its military, particularly the Navy. It's now reached a strength where it can conceivably confront the dominance of the United States. We talked about this previous episode. And Mr. Xi may be angling to do exactly that, earlier this year ordering his fleet to resolutely safeguard national security, sovereignty and development interests. Washington, for its part, has also stepped up the pressure. For the first time, it has formally declared China's territorial claims to be illegal. Right.
The situation is definitely getting hot as far as I can see it.
Does it? You follow that conflict a lot more than I do, so...
It is getting hot because, as we've said in the previous reports, Xi Jinping is kind of losing control of the population within China. So it wouldn't be out of question to use a war as a justification to unify the nation.
Would that even work?
Yes, it would work because Chinese
because
the Chinese people are pretty naive. As in, let's not forget that. Well,
yes, that's true. No, I'm not disputing that. Yeah.
Yeah, but we're not disputing that. Let's remember that China, in the first years when it became communist, the children told on their parents at state security for not being communist enough.
Yes.
And even though that mentality sometimes slipped, for example, the Tiananmen Square, where as we know, nothing happened.
Absolutely nothing happened in Tiananmen Square in June 1989.
You still got to consider that several tens of millions of people believed at the beginning of the pandemic that the virus was actually an invention by the US military. When, even though China's pretty big, it's got 1.3 billion people, sometimes it's sufficient to have, as we know, 10% population being radical.
Yeah, 130 million radicals can wreak quite a lot of damage to themselves first and foremost, not to mention to others.
And this news article will be related to the one that we're gonna read after. You got any more thoughts on this?
Now, as far as I remember from the previous World So Far report episodes, it's still a lot of posturing over there because they could not. I don't think they have the technological capacity to confront the US in an open way, especially on maritime terms. I don't think so. I don't think that's possible yet. I don't think it will be possible. Because again, the US has this exercise of being a maritime power for about 160 years. The CCP is not even 160 years old.
It's true, but it depends on how much is Xi Jinping's power slipping.
Right.
Even if
if you can rally the entire structure.
Yeah, if you can rally the entire structure, then it's going to get pretty complicated.
Probably the US would still win, but it would be a difficult job. Whereas if his power is really slipping, a house divided.
He's definitely not a character to concede defeat. That much is clear. Otherwise, he wouldn't have done acts like declaring himself great leader like Mao Zedong up until he's gonna die.
Yeah, supreme leader.
Pretty much
the supreme
dear leader for life.
Dear leader for life, yes. So, soft rep, China's President Xi Jinping, or otherwise known as Winnie the Flu, tells his military advisors to prepare for war in the South China Sea. The president elevated the aggressive rhetoric between China and the US last week when he reportedly told his top military advisors to prepare for war in the South China Sea. The speech, which was made during an inspection tour of China's Southern Theater Command, did not directly refer to the United States in quotes released by China's state-owned media outlets, but the target of Xi's ire seems nonetheless clear. It's necessary to strengthen the mission and concentrate preparations for fighting a war, Xi was quoted as saying to his top military leaders about the South China Sea in the region and the region around Taiwan. We need to take all complex situations into consideration and make emergency plans accordingly. We have to step up combat readiness exercises, joint exercises, and confrontational exercises to enhance servicemen's capabilities and preparation for war. Tensions have been increasing between the US and China in recent years, in large part due to China's aggressive claims of sovereignty over the entirety of the South China Sea. The waterway, which is the site of competing territorial claims of no fewer than 5 nations, sees nearly a third of all global commerce shipped across its waves. It also boasts large deposits of natural resources and bountiful fishing territories, making the South China Sea among the most economically important bits of real estate anywhere on the globe. China's claims over the South China Sea are, according to Chinese policy, based on historical precedent. Although other nations have shorelines abutting the South China Sea, and international law dictates that their exclusive economic zones should extend the 200 nautical miles from their own shores, China's belief that they have long owned territories throughout the waterway has led them to force foreign nations out of their own territorial waters. This affront to international law has led the US, the United Kingdom, and several Pacific nations to adopt a confrontational approach to China's claims to the region, calling them illegal and refusing to acknowledge China's rule over the territory. The US Navy, in particular, has conducted a series of freedom of navigation operations. We talked about that. Earlier this month, American and Chinese destroyers nearly collided while posturing toward one another during one such voyage, ramping up tensions and rhetoric on both sides. Despite China's rapidly expanding navy and tough talk, however, the US has been garnering increased international support in the endeavor. It seems unlikely that those freedom of navigation voyages operated by the United States or other blue water navies will be ending anytime soon. There's also this aspect with the international support, because fine, China and the United States, it's one thing, but do you want to fuck around with the British submarines as well?
Let's just not even look as far as the UK. You gotta consider the closest enemy of China, Japan.
Oh, and then there's Japan, yes, which has quadrupled its military spending.
And not only that, but Japan is right now.
It's probably the fastest growing military on Earth.
It's not only the fast growing military, but it's number 5 on the global scale. When you're considering that they're not official military, they're still employees of the state.
Yes, and that's why I think Xi Jinping will not force his way into a hot conflict on this one, not yet anyway, because I'm sure. I mean, Winnie the Flu has done a lot of stupid shit, so there is always that margin of error. Maybe he'll do something stupid again. But on the other hand, I'm sure he knows this already and knows this as well. Do you want to piss off the Japs as well, and the Brits as well.
And not only the Brits, but also the Philippines, which are a natural ally of the US.
Yes.
They've always been on the US side.
Not to mention some sabotage from Vietnam, which will definitely not say no. They won't even ask. They won't even wait to be asked. They would do it anyway.
Yes, but and there's also Taiwan. So so this news article has been posted just today. The U.S. Congress has voted for a deal to sell military infrastructure worth $1.8 billion to Taiwan. So the US is definitely not taking any chances in that area, which is why shoring up the defenses in Taiwan would be a good idea, particularly because that's the easiest access point for China, because Taiwan is pretty close. They just got to swim a few tens of kilometers and they're already there. Sure, you may argue that they definitely do not have the doctrine of amphibious warfare, but that doesn't mean that they won't try, at least.
Yes, and at least Taiwan appears to be an easy target. And of course, the point of the empire is to make it as a hard target as possible, in order for it to at least be able to withstand the first assault. Because by the time of the
at least buy enough time for the rest to
for the cavalry to arrive. Right. So that's one aspect. And of course, as this article correctly points out, the point is not that particular strip of sea in itself, because sure, it has rich fishing waters, whatever, no one cares about that, really. It's about on the route on which it is located. That's the stake of that particular place. It's not the rare minerals. It's not the great fish. No. Okay, those are important too, but really they're not.
It's all about the trade routes that go through that area.
And the reason I'm mentioning this is because I know there is a portion of our audience which tends to be on the Duginist-inspired Ron Paul type of argument, which is one of those mental disorders that still sometimes plague right-wing circles, unfortunately. The point of the empire is for the trade routes. It's not. Well, okay. I may sound like Xi Jinping here when I say that human rights is just an excuse, but sometimes it is. Sometimes it is. Not always, but sometimes it is. The point is the trade routes, and the trade routes benefit every member of the empire, not just Taiwan or not just Southern Europe or whatever. No. They benefit every member of the empire, including and especially the United States. I mean, one of the reasons stuff is cheap in the United States, cheaper than in Europe, is the trade route. The second reason being, of course, the superior tax policy, which we in Europe, being a bunch of faggots, aren't able to adopt. But even with an inferior tax regime like in Europe, it's still cheaper thanks to the trade routes. And those trade routes matter regardless of who is the global manufacturing hub, regardless of anything. As we've covered in previous episodes of the World So Far report, the manufacturing hub is slowly moving towards Vietnam and India and other places, but those trade routes will still be important for the exact same reason, and that's the stake. I mean, that's what makes it the most valuable piece of real estate on Earth, not the fish or the rare minerals. I mean,
but there's also an economic argument, because the reason why China got into a heated conversation with the Philippines is that the Philippines wanted to drill for oil in the South China Sea area, and they do have territorial claim in that area that obviously China stepped over them.
Yes, and the Philippines.
And the Philippines is a pretty poor country.
Yes,
and
they kind of need it. They kind of need it. I know Winnie the Pooh doesn't like it, but eventually this guy is going to have to be told, tough luck, mate. Seriously, tough luck, mate. And sometimes if you want to piss off the shills, and you'll find a lot of CCP shills on the internet, probably eventually they'll find this channel and start flooding this channel as well. You can use their own propaganda against them, like this particular type of propaganda. CNN, China's economic recovery gains even more momentum. The China's economic recovery is picking up steam as the country continues to dig its way out of the turmoil caused by the cough pandemic. The world's second largest economy expanded 4.9% in the July to September quarter compared to a year ago, according to government statistics released on Monday. I'm not going to read the whole article, but basically what they're saying is that we've been able to fake some more papers, and I've been tinkering a little bit more with our GDP growth. Basically saying that the GDP grew a cumulative 0.7% through the first 9 months of 2020. Does anyone really believe that?
Well, I'm pretty sure that a lot of analysts who have no idea how not just Chinese style reporting happens, but communist style reporting happens. It is pretty false. Make no mistake about it. How exactly can you argue that? The Chinese economy grew 4.9% in a circumstance that
in the third quarter.
Yeah,
and 0.7% over the whole year.
Yeah. Well, yeah. In the fourth quarter, yeah, that may be possible because a lot of Chinese people, particularly it's been the Golden Week, and during the Golden Week, not just in China but also in Japan, there's a humongous amount of consumer spending being done, but not that much. In order to 4.9%, you're gonna tell me that you've done just slightly worse compared to the past few years when absolutely nothing like the pandemic happened.
Now, the argument by the CCP shills is basically that they only had to shut down the Wuhan, actually the entirety of the Hubei province, but not much of everything else, which is false, but that's usually the argument used by the shills. In reality, that's not the case. They shut down entire provinces quite a lot. And, because they're a bunch of disciplined NPCs, unlike we Europeans who tend to like freedom more than, government security, because they're cute NPCs and allowed their doors to be welded by the state so they don't transmit the cough further. As a result, they got rid of the cough faster, and yada yada yada. That's usually the argument that the CCP shills and the lockdownist religion tends to broadcast. The problem is that that's just not true. People still cough in China. It's just that the party no longer cares.
Yeah, and they don't care, which is why, how exactly do you argue China being one of the least affected countries, even though it's got the biggest population before India, but they got less
than 100,000 people.
Less than 100,000 cases.
Yeah, I mean, Romania has 130 or 1,000 or something like that. Yeah, exactly. We're gonna get to 300 for sure.
Exactly, and the population of Romania is just
17, 19.
Yeah, it's similar to the population of the Wuhan area, including the metropolitan area, but also the suburban area. Let's say like that. So when you shut down entire provinces, which are also huge industrial bases, who exactly is going to believe you that you got 4.9%?
I like it that a lot of analysts behave as if it's some sort of breaking news that China is forging its own numbers.
I'm actually convinced that they have no idea that's happening, because I've seen this trend for at least 8 years since I got interested in global economics. They always swallow the information from China as being true when it isn't.
As I said, the conjuration of stupidity. This is not a conspiracy, it's just people are not stupid, people are fucking stupid. But again, we've seen, you haven't, but the world has seen this kind of conjuration of stupidity before. In early 1980s, there were Harvard economists seriously arguing that in 15 years, the Soviet Union will outpace the United States in economic output and standard of living. 15 years later, the Soviet Union hadn't been in existence for several years.
Yeah, and they've done those calculations in a period when the Soviet Union already was entering the so-called era of stagnation.
Yes, yes. But you know, the official numbers by the
Yeah.
Statistics Bureau in Moscow
Yeah.
was issuing great projections, and the Harvard economists who tended to be the only people on earth
Yes.
who took them seriously.
Yes, we finished the 5-year plan in 4 years and a half.
Yes, yes, exactly. So yeah,
Record productions per hectare.
record productions, exactly. Well, now we're reporting record productions in the cough. So you know, I mean, you know,
Yeah.
the more things change, the more they stay the same. That's why I don't. That's why I hold the progressives in utter disdain, because they really think things change. They don't. They never do. Japan Times: suicide spike in Japan shows mental health toll of the cough. The number of suicide rates rose in Japan in August due to more women and school-aged children taking their own lives, offering a first glimpse into the consequences of the mental health strain brought by COVID-19 around the globe. Japan is among a few major economies that releases timely data on suicides, as it is a persistent societal issue. The numbers hint at what may be going on around the world as countries grapple with the fallout from mass unemployment and social isolation that's impacting certain groups of people more than the rest. Sociologists have long warned that the economic and social disruption wrought by measures to contain the coronavirus could cause more deaths than the pathogen itself. Will, for sure. In Japan, the suicide rate has been falling, but it remains top cause of premature deaths. This year, suicide has taken over 13,000 lives, while total COVID-19 fatalities number less than 2,000. According to the government statistics, the number of suicides in August increased by 15.4% to 1,854. Although making up a smaller proportion of suicides, the number of women taking their own lives jumped by around 40%. The number of suicides by students in elementary to high schools more than doubled to 59 from the same period last year. The mental health toll looks set to be one of the pandemic's most insidious legacies, given the difficulty of grasping or measuring the magnitude of self-inflicted harm until it is too late. Major economies like the US and China don't report official data on suicides until years later, though experts have predicted a wave of such deaths this year, while anecdotal evidence abounds on social media platforms. Up-to-date suicide numbers can help quickly determine which groups are at high risk, said Yasuki Sawada, the chief economist at Asian Development Bank and the University of Tokyo professor who has written books on suicide prevention and the phenomenon's economic impact. If local governments can determine which age group or what occupations are showing higher risks for suicide prevention measures can be implemented swiftly. No, they can't. A US study released in May predicted as many as 75,000 additional people could die in the next decade from deaths of despair as a result of the coronavirus crisis, a term that refers to suicides and deaths related to substance abuse. In India, 65% of therapists reported an increase in self-harm and suicide ideation among patients since the pandemic began, according to a study released in September by Suicide Prevention India Foundation. Psychopathologies go brrr. No, this idea that we should identify the groups at risk and then we can deploy measures from the suicide prevention. No, that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. If measures related to suicide prevention had worked, Japan would have been the country to teach us all how to do that, because they have the biggest pressing issue when it comes to suicide. Obviously they failed because you can't do it. Nobody can do it. Why? Because suicide ideation is not a pathogen epidemic, so you can counter it via other types of measures. It's a mental issue. And the mental issue, you solve it, or at least you address it, by individual measures, by therapy, individual therapy.
But you could also see
which you can't do on Zoom. Okay? Or Google Scholar or Schoolboard, whatever what it's called, that particular crap that students pretend to use.
But in Japan it's also a societal issue.
Yes.
Not just a mental health
issue. The society
issue.
Itself pushes you to suicide. It does.
It does. If you people don't know, read the Bushido Code.
Yes.
Even though it still is not applied in the military measure, it was applied to as early as World War II. It still exists at a societal level, and as you can see, all the people take it seriously.
Yeah,
plenty enough to be more than the cough deaths this year in Japan, unsurprisingly.
And it's gonna and it's coming. I mean, this whole issue of social isolation and whatever, which most of those measures were bullshit anyway. But we'll have many years to talk about that. But it's coming on the backdrop of an huge pre-existing issue. I mean, look it up on Google. Japan has had to grapple. I don't remember the exact term in Japanese, because there's a term for that. Of course, there is. With people who basically lock themselves in a room and don't come out there for years.
Hikikomori.
Hikikomori. There you go. That one. So yeah, good luck. Mental disorders like these have been a thing in Japan, and successive governments have tried to address the problem. All of them failed. All of them will continue to fail, because they all start from the issue that it's just that that individual has an issue and that's it. But it's usually not just that individual. It's usually other individuals as well. Sometimes, of course, it's just that individual, but not always. And governments only try to address this as by statistics and centrally. Doesn't work like that, because it's not a contagious pathogen like the cough. It's a different kind of pathogen. It comes with ideas. As some of our friends say, ideas have people. It just so happens that I feel really sorry for them, because and it's particularly true in Japan. But it's the article is making a good point. Other countries should take note. This is coming. If it hasn't already come, it's coming to your street. It's coming to your apartment building. Okay. I was half jokingly, I would say, but yeah, because I'm a cynical bastard, so I usually joke even about the most macabre things happening. I was having a conversation this morning with my wife about the, she's in a book club or whatever, and it was like, man, you are right about these people losing their fucking minds. Basically, some lady in that particular club, she got a cold. Could have been the cough or a different kind of cold. Let's not forget, in this country there are 18 coronaviruses that are endemic. So got one of those, and she started crying and had a nervous breakdown, being afraid that she might die and leave her child, motherless. The lady is like 32 years old in imperfect health. The chances of her dying of any of the 18 endemic coronaviruses are 0. Not statistical 0, absolute 0. You don't die from a cough at 32 in perfect health as a female, period. But of course, she's been coughing before, but the reason this time she had a nervous breakdown is because she watched too much TV and believed the panic card propaganda.
And there are millions of people out there that believe the panic card propaganda, not just in Romania, but
no, globally there are hundreds of millions.
Globally, there are hundreds of millions that follow the constant bombardment of panic card propaganda on the COVID-19 virus.
Yeah, and the cynical in me says, okay, that's great, because it is and it will continue to red pill people by the tens of millions, because people who had never considered that maybe the couch has a point. Just yesterday I had a long phone conversation with a person who used to report my videos hoping it would get deleted. Somehow he got a hold of my phone number. That's a difficult task, and we had a long conversation of his long but not very long transition from March to yesterday. From that guy from the couch is a fucking loon to holy shit, that guy from the couch is entirely correct. Holy shit, the entirety of the press, they're intentionally lying. They're all insane.
Yep.
So the cynical in me says, okay, fine, we'll be fine, because, well, cynically speaking, we'll be fine. However, until we get to that point, there'll be mountains of bodies, and it won't be because of the cough. Oh yeah. There will be a few of them from the cough, of course, because the cough is real, and yes, some people die from it, but most of it is going to be from economic depression, mental depression, nervous breakdown, suicides, and all sorts of other mental health related issues. And as we were mentioning at the beginning of this episode, our friends in the United States should take note, particularly because, unlike Japan, they don't have mental health institutions. The ability to get help for one's mental health is severely hampered. Is that the word I'm looking for? When compared to Japan or compared to Eastern Europe, really. Because at least in Eastern Europe, even at least in bigger cities, there is an accessible psychiatrist. And usually doesn't cost that much. But in the US, even if you have the money, you still have a problem. You have to travel quite a lot to even access such services. And some of them are simply not available, period.
Or if they are available, they go on that mentality of let's just
medicate you into submission. Yes,
pretty much medicate you into being
they
basically slightly better than a vegetable.
And it's not because necessarily because the psychiatrists in the US are evil. Of course, some of them are, like in any profession, there are evil people. But it's because there's not much that they can do because the infrastructure is what it is. And of course, that transformation was in itself built over 50 years. There aren't even that many psychiatrists alive in the United States who still remember how they used to do things before 1975-ish when this particular transformation began. So take a look at your kids. Build your kids into stronger dissident people. Those are the only kids who will be fine 10 years from now. All the rest of them, we're having the conversation about this, about kids in our group today. When one of the teenagers who routinely follows the couch was talking about his classmates, and some of them are going fully insane, and he was coming to us and said, well, I tried to calm them down, but man, these people have gone fully insane, all of them. And like, and many of them will end up being drunkards and dregs of society, and some of that will not be their fault, unfortunately. Some of that will not be their fault. Some of it, of course, will be terrible choices and whatnot, but some of it will not be. Who will pay for that? Oh yeah, that's right, the stupid will pay for it. Because of course, you all wanted to listen to the experts. Remember in March when you asked me how many doctoral degrees I have? More than your stupid experts. Oceania news: a container ship of QLD's coast could be carrying a new unknown strain of the COVID-19. The Sofrana Serville was prevented from docking at Brisbane and was instead anchored off the coast of Mululaba on Thursday. All 19 crew members will be tested by Queensland Health on Wednesday after an engineer who worked on board tested positive in New Zealand on Saturday. It's believed he caught the cough while working on the Sofrana Serville off Auckland on October the 12th and the 13th. General Manager of Maritime Safety Queensland, Angus Mitchell, said the container ship's crew members could be tested and would also undergo serology testing. He said the vessel first entered Queensland's water on Monday after departing New Zealand and traveling via Numo in New Caledonia. An engineer who worked on this vessel and another one tested positive. It's a strain they haven't seen in New Zealand before. They're still trying to work out where he got it from, but either of the two international visiting ships are an obvious place. So out of an abundance of caution, we're testing the crew in Queensland waters. There has been no reports of illness on board. Testing is expected to take several hours, and Mr. Mitchell says if any cases are detected, they will deal with the ship exactly as we have done with dozens of others prior. Mr. Mitchell said since the end of January, when maritime safety enforced strict COVID-19 protocols, at least 10,000 ships or 60 to 80 ships per day have entered the waters. That's around 200,000 seafarers, and we've had a number of positive cases among them. He said, we bring them to shore and treat them as need be. These ships are essentially floating quarantines. We want to make sure Queensland is protected and we continue the vital trade. What a cold is sometimes mutating, and right, it's New Zealand who it's basically a penal colony, even more so than Australia, and they shut down entirely, and now oh my god, we get all of these mutations of this cough. It comes from that mentality that we can control nature and
but you see, even though that seabearer hasn't come in contact with anybody because even as the article says,
the ships are floating quarantines.
Not just that, but he caught off the virus while he was basically within international waters on a floating ship. If you remember, back in April, there was a situation that the French aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle was in the middle of the Atlantic on an operation that lasted nearly a month, and somehow they got the virus.
Well, apparently that one was solved. The mystery of that one was solved. Apparently they did dock and went to the hookers in some French city about 10 days before the news broke out. However, there hasn't been solved the issue of the isolated tribes in Brazil who caught the virus, and whereas none of them had left that area for months, not just a few weeks, for months. Nobody got in, nobody got out. It's not out of their own volition necessarily, not in the sense that they were quarantined or whatever, but because as a rule they would stay isolated for several months a year anyway, and have been doing that for the last several hundred years, and they still coughed, like the whole tribe coughed. Very few people died, but
yeah, exactly. So get this in your heads. We are not saying that the virus doesn't exist. We're saying it exists. As we've seen, you can get it even though you don't come into contact with anybody. So even if you're on a ship or if you're in the middle of the Amazon rainforest, there are still chances that you may get it even though you don't come into contact with anybody. But at the same time, this is also the reason why I put this is also because there's a significant push right now for accepting the vaccine against the cough. How exactly can you vaccinate a virus that it started with 2 strains back when it was still in China, then it started in Italy. A few months ago it had 30, and now God knows how many there are. How exactly can you vaccinate this in the circumstance that the influenza vaccine has to change every year because the strain changes every year, and it's not even every year, it's every season. So
twice a year.
So exactly, it lasts anywhere between 3 to 6 months if you're lucky.
Yeah. And again, I would be more terrified if at the very least it would have been a serious disease, but it's not. I mean, really, it's not. Yeah, sure, protect the elderly, sure, but leave me the fuck alone, mate. And again, New Zealand is going to have a big issue. But before I explain that, let's read the final. I think it's the final one. But Axios Jacinda Ardern, that's the name, claims historic victory in New Zealand election. God help you all. Prime Minister Ardern told reporters Sunday that she expects to form a government within the next 2 or 3 weeks following her Labour Party's historic election win. Labour is projected to win 49.1% of the vote, ensuring 64 of the 120 available parliamentary seats. Ardern said in her victory speech today, New Zealand has shown the greatest support in at least 50 years. Ardern said she would talk with Green Party to discuss possibly continuing the coalition partnership, but added, we clearly have a mandate on behalf of New Zealand to crack on with government formation. A party needs to win 61 parliamentary seats to form a government alone. No party has won an outright majority in New Zealand since the mixed member proportional representation voting system was introduced in 1996. Ardern billed the race as the COVID election and has been widely praised for her leadership in handling the pandemic. You're gonna eat your words for that.
Oh yeah.
For the record, the election was delayed by 4 weeks to October the 17th because of a second outbreak in Auckland. New Zealand imposed one of the world's toughest lockdowns when the pandemic reached the country in March. The island nation went 102 days with no detected cases in the community before COVID-19 re-emerged in Auckland in August. The country's most populous city went into a lockdown that was less severe than the first, while lesser restrictions returned to the rest of the country. There are now no restrictions on the population of 5 million people. Officials stamped out the second outbreak in NZ, hadn't reported new coronavirus cases in the community since September the 25th, but Health Director General Ashley Bloomfield announced a new one on Sunday. That's the one that we talked about, I think. Isn't it? Yes, it's the one with the from the docs. Yes, so you're gonna swallow your words, Mrs. Jacinda, in ways that, and unfortunately it's not going to be her that will suffer, because now she has 4 years ahead of her as a prime minister. And even if she loses the next election, who cares? Manages to get an outright a majority from the vote. Whether the vote was fair or not, it's a separate discussion. At least for her, it's not going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem for the rest of the population.
Yeah, and for some reason, I'm getting this impression that New Zealand is starting to become like the Canada of Oceania, where the Labour leadership was already catastrophic enough, as we've seen in
Canada, yeah.
And
then the populace doubles down on the insanity.
And now they double down on the insanity by voting her into the parliament with a majority. That's pretty catastrophic.
Yeah, and the catastrophe is going to be visible 4 months from now, 5 months from now, something like that.
When the Q4 then the Q1 2021 results will come out.
Yeah, I'm thinking April. Which, by the way, comes in winter in New Zealand. It's gonna be glorious. Is it winter? No, it's late autumn. Whatever. But it's gonna be glorious because okay, fine. You didn't cough for 102 consecutive days, and then another a month, whatever. Who cares? But how many New Zealanders are going to die, and how many of them have already died as a result of the cure that the Labour Party has imposed on the country? Because again, these things do not come as no cost. I'm looking at the GDP graphs in New Zealand. Surely that's going to reflect on the pockets of the average New Zealander, won't they? Because it's a country that's been living off tourism, which, by the way, you suspended indefinitely, right? Someone has to bring food to the table. Who? You all gonna eat some fish? I'm just saying, man. I'm just saying. So that's one aspect. Second aspect, how is a leftist government going to fix the economic downturn? Because usually leftist governments, when
they're gonna fix it with more government.
With more government, yeah, that's gonna work. That's gonna work. No, it won't. It's not gonna work. And nowadays it's all happy and glory. We'll see about that in April. After 2 consecutive trimesters, quarters, with not just economic downturn, with catastrophe.
Yes, particularly because geographically New Zealand's pretty isolated, doesn't have a lot of choices when it comes to doing commerce, and they will never dream of running an autarky on those.
It doesn't have the population. It doesn't have the population.
Doesn't have the resources.
Doesn't have the geography. Doesn't have the infrastructure. Doesn't have anything. But and to make things worse, because that's the point I wanted to make on this article. To make things worse, you elected the individual who took the most panicard approach to the COVID-19. Which means there won't be any opening of the trade that actually feeds New Zealanders anytime soon. Which means it's not just not going to be an economic downturn, it's going to be a deep depression.
Yep, it's going to be...
And it's going to be with protests, it's going to be with violence. There's no way you can avoid that. You know that already.
No, it's going to be the 1990s all over again for New Zealand.
Oh yeah, we actually know that the 1980s.
1980s,
yes, because the 1980s were terrible by the way, also under Labour leadership. History has a sense of humor.
History has the bad habit of repeating itself for those who do not learn it.
Yep, first as a tragedy, second as a comedy. And I mean, really, Mrs. Jacinda, whatever her pronunciation is, she's more of in the comedy department. I mean, she's laughable. But hey, you all elected her. Enjoy the ride. It's not gonna be fun. Okie dokie. So I think this is the last one. Australian politics. Wild plan to turn North Queensland into a separate state. First, Western Australia wanted out of the Federation with their Waxit plan. Now it looks like another plan to redraw the map of Australia is gathering up a major head of steam. With the proposed title of the Reef State, the idea is to give North Queensland the powers to make its own laws and split the current Sunshine State in two. The Wild plan is a major policy platform for Queensland's newest party, North Queensland's First, which was set up just 12 months ago by member of Whitsunday, Jason Costigan.
He told news.com.au he used to be ridiculed by his former Liberal National Party colleagues when they'd go for beers outside Brisbane's Parliament House, and he'd bring up the idea of North Queensland going out on its own. However, Mr. Costigan believes that if his plan to have a referendum on the split by 2020 ever makes it, he'll be the one having the last laugh. The breakaway is not a new idea. Mr. Costigan claims it has been touted by some in some form as far back as 1865, but he reckons North Queenslanders have finally had enough of being told what to do by their southern neighbours. He says they want to be able to shoot crocodiles and burn coal without being lectured in by the city dwellers in Brisbane. He reckons North Queenslanders are also getting a raw deal. People up here aren't stupid. They know we're getting the crumbs when it comes to infrastructure and funding, despite us having a 70 billion economy and a population of around 1 million people. He said that despite the billions the region makes from the mining, sugar, cattle and tourism industries, many towns and communities across North Queensland are dying. He said major roads like Bruce Highway are filled with cracks, hospitals can't perform basic services like maternity or renal dialysis, and services are so poor that bodies are having to be transported up to 1,000 kilometers for autopsies. Oh my god, that's terrible.
A lot.
That's terrible. The government in the southeast of the state is sucking the life out of North and Central Queensland, and it will continue to do so until there is a 21st century version of a civil war, unless we finally do something about it. He said coronavirus recession has only made things worse. There's a lot of noise coming from the gold fields and the cane fields because the wheels have fallen off. A lot of people are struggling. They're wondering how they can get a job, how they can get ahead, and how they're going to pay the bills. He believes North Queensland could turn itself around by making its own laws instead of having to accept the mumbo-jumbo laws and red tape conjured up by the two major parties in Brisbane. He wants to see concrete poured on projects like Urana Dam and coal mines, but he says a green agenda from the Queensland Parliament is holding them back, and he's probably not wrong. He also claims there is a big cultural difference between the southeast of the state and those in the north. There's a difference in people in Brisbane have more in common with Sydney than people in Airlie Beach, for example, he said. That sounds familiar.
Well, if he manages to get that one, I'm personally going to make a sacrifice and be one of the first tourists to North Queensland.
When is the referendum supposed to take place? This year? That's what.
Well, he's trying to push it
to take place this year.
Yeah, to actually get it approved this year. Well, it's most likely going to happen in 2021. But considering the way things are going in Australia, he's definitely going to have the push required in order to get the referendum sorted, because
that would be cute.
Yeah, because Australia, let's remember, did the humongously stupid decision to shut down trade.
Yes, yes. I think they're the only country in the world that actually did that.
I'm not sure about New Zealand. No,
New Zealand, they mentioned that they got in 200,000 people just on the seas alone for the trade. So no, New Zealand didn't. Not even New Zealand did that. Yes. What I'm saying is that in 2018, I think, or 2017, I was invited to Australia and debated with myself, and my parliament voted against. When I learned how long it takes to get there, I would have had to change 3 airplanes and change in Qatar and then in Singapore and then
in Singapore as well. But I felt
it didn't have a direct route at the dates that I needed.
That's impressive, because I know Emirates does have a direct flight to Perth, Brisbane.
Yes,
or even to Auckland. It has a direct flight.
Yes, introduced in December. I needed it in September 2017. Yes, yeah, I know. Okay. I know what you're talking about, but it wasn't available at that time, and I will have to change in Singapore as well. Also in Brisbane, because I have to go to the Gold Coast, so another flight inside Australia. And I decided against it.
Well, but this time you could have taken the train from Perth to Brisbane. That would have been a nice support.
Yeah, maybe. But this time around, if this passes, I might rethink. Because I suspect first I'm going to petition their new government to give me an exemption to their stupidly insane smoking laws,
and then I'm coming as the first tourist. Because otherwise, if they're still subjected to the insane laws that most of Australia has about smoking, then fuck you all, no. I'm gonna stick around here and in Africa. But if they give any exemptions for their smoking laws, that would be great. Now, isn't this familiar? Because we've seen these kinds of things, think of upstate New York versus New York. Yeah. Think of Team North FC and South FC in England. Even our own country.
And there was also Quebec.
Mm-hmm. Or even our own country. Yeah. I mean, we here up north are less busy with...
with the politics from Bucharest.
Yes. And even now with the cough, on paper they're the same, but in reality they're not. People here don't give a shit. They're not panicked, for the most part, as opposed to southeast Bucharest and all of the suburban counties. They're a lot more panicked, although admittedly Târgoviște is not. So yeah, there seems to be a common pattern here. At some point, North FC says, "You know what? Fuck you all." It has to be something that I haven't given enough thought about it, but there is something in the cities that make people stupid. There is, and I see this as a city dweller myself. But there's something in the cities that makes people stupider over the long run. I don't know what. Because I'm a Swiss city dweller, but I'm also traveling a lot. So, but most people get caught up in such a city bubble, and they forget about basic stuff. And even at the peak of the panic related to the cough here, you would see city dwellers asking for even tougher measures, and normal people be like, yeah, but that would cripple transportation. You can't do that.
Yeah, it's because they're very divorced from reality. I wouldn't think it will be that far-fetched for them not to even consider how exactly does the food that they order through Deliveroo or Uber Eats or Foodpanda comes to their doorstep. It's an entire process.
Yeah, I bet people who seriously believe that meat grows in the supermarket. So, and I wish I were joking. But at first when I learned about the phenomenon, I thought it doesn't exist. Then I encountered it myself, and I thought it's probably pretty marginal. Well, apparently it's not. Now, of course, that doesn't mean most city dwellers believe meat grows in the supermarket, but it is indicative of the way the mentality tends to become ossified in the bigger cities. They tend to outright ignore things that tend to matter, like you have to have decent infrastructure, you have to have transportation, you have to have trade, because otherwise your city dies. It's not that just those rednecks from the north.
Those rednecks from the north will be A-OK without you.
They will still be fine without you. You won't be fine without them. Because at the end of the day, when cities fail, oh my God, I won't be able to do some fancy online trade. That would be the worst thing that can happen to me as North FC. But if North FC goes to the drain, you in the city won't eat.
Yep.
Water doesn't get pumped into your building. Electricity doesn't get to you. That's how things work.
Oh, well, but at least without water or without electricity, you can still survive. You can still source it somehow, but without food. What are you gonna do? Grow your own chickens all of a sudden? Grow your own garden?
in apartment buildings.
Yes, in apartment buildings, on top of the
top of the building.
Yeah,
yes.
on top of the building.
That's definitely going to work, and it won't create violence. No, of course not. Kids, be real.
Yeah.
Alrighty, good luck to North FC, Angus. To North Queensland, that would be cute. That will be pretty much it for now. Next week, probably on Wednesday, the videotaping, and on Thursday or Friday, the publishing. I'm getting back to the solo videos as well, slowly, as everything on this channel, slowly. And Gibbs shekels. I really need a new hard drive. I'm serious about
Please
this.
give money.
Without a new hard drive, I might not be able to make that many episodes, period, because I don't have a place to store them. See you around. Cheers.